What's up? What's up? What's up, peoples? Why is this not? Why is this annoying me? Annoying me? Annoying me? I said, why is this annoying me? Annoying me? Annoying me? Alright, let me mark this as a bookmark. Why is this? Just bookmark this page. Why is that not? Bookmark this tab. Bucks County online assignment email. Done. Done and done and done. Done and done. Done and done and done. Done and done. So that what? Why is it not? There we go. All right, cool, cool. Back up, puppy. Watch out, puppy. Yeah. Do I fear the shadows? I certainly do now. Come on, get down. I forgot my glasses. Opie's all over my shit. Here, Opie. Drop this on the floor so it's yours. What did he tell you? Let's land at the repulsor. I do like the repulsor. Oh, I was still messing with my Facebook, setting on my chats. Damn, why is loot never that good before? Damn, look at all these blue vests. Alright, here we go. Turn the volume up a bit so I can hear the craziness. Let's do that. I do really enjoy this charge rifle. Let me pop on my face cam so y'all can actually turn it off because it's not set up properly. Just looking at my art wall. chilling. No, you're not supposed to. Give me this. Give. You can't. This isn't a chew toy. We'll play tug at some point, but you can't chew it. No. Nope. Cut it out.
I put so much butter on this for you.
Oh, thanks. You didn't have to put that much butter on it. Tell everybody about it. Thank you. It's alright. Come on, Opie, get down. I do. But Opie, get down. Come on, dog.
Here, why don't you give him a tug?
Yeah, he was like chewing on it though, so I don't know if it was left somewhere.
I did on purpose.
So he could chew it? He's not supposed to. No, that's.
Keep him out of your hair. Then where's the tongue at?
I have no idea.
You gave him to him the other day with milk over that.
I don't know if it's still in here or not.
Okay, well, relax.
You relax.
Let me do that piece up there while that chews. You're gonna look like a free girl. You like that, huh?
Oh, this purple's here. Gotta get that. No, this storm's gonna hurt. I got this bagel for you, Opie. You'll be fine. You'll be good. You don't gotta look all sad out the door. Come on, get down. Oh, this is a mistake. Went the wrong direction. Yeah, Pathfinder Octane would have been much better. Get this speed. Oh yeah. Oh. Seems like they're flying further away from it. I need to either stay away from people, and actually that's what I need to do. I need to stay away from people and win as a legend. So that guy landed pretty close, I think. get to the evac ship. Back up, Opie. Back up. Oh shit, the ship's there. Oh man, I shouldn't have stopped to loot that. So I gotta get on it to win. No. Damn it. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Don't that suck. Don't that suck? It sure as hell does. I gotta fix my camera. Why you gotta do this? Watch out, watch out, watch out. Let me, looking for a clip that I had of Grim going ham and potatoes and some fools.
You're being laser rifled. Nice. Get out of there.
Very nice. Alright, so let's download that. Opie, why are you between my legs, dog? I'm going ham. And potatoes. It's going ham and then some. Pop that. Alright, so let's download it. Open the email. New message. Here, Opie. Here, Opie. Where the hell did you go? Eat that. That's for you. Two. Boop, boop. Boop. Subject. IG. Video. Gonna be playing, playing some Overwatch with the girlfriend. Send that over. Where'd the mixer chat? There's the mixer chat. Okay. Alright, so now I got that over here. Ready up for some more Shadowfall. Sorry, Opie, I need a little bit more space, bub. Facebook, come on, get down. I did just make a Tumblr. So I have to find. Gotta figure out what my Tumblr is, and I can post that there as well. Back up, Opie. Opie, back up. Fuck, man. Super annoying. super annoying. Their email would be go lay down, Opie. Get out from under the desk. Come on, get out. Get out. Get out from under the desk. Alright. Let's go get him. Opie, stop drooling on my leg, please. Thank you. Stop chewing the fucking chair, dog. There's like 5 toys that I can see right now. Plus you've eaten twice in the last like 2 hours. Get out from under the desk. Come on. Out from under the desk. Thank you. And like I fed you bagels. Don't. Oh man. Who else? That's probably enough. Alright. Caption for it. looking at you from what they call God spot. Up, they see me, I think. Yeah, bro. Kind of feel bad about it. I know how tough it is to get to this. What do you got? What? Damn, we probably just got like 15 kills right there. Oh. Play some Apex Legends. We'll also be playing some Overwatch. Some point. Stop by and say hi. Actually, I'm done with this game mode. Join some Grimster for some true Apexness. Clipboard. Oh man, I want to add something to post about how important it is to have good teammates. Because the clip I put up isn't of me, it's of Grim. Man, I done flubbed that up. Waiting on Grim to get out of this game. Oh man. Pop that up there. We can do. Let's start going through and looking for more clips. Cut it out, Ope. You're making too much noise, brah. What is happening? Come on, Twitch, get your shit together.
Okay, now it's not mechanical.
Come on, Twitch. Man, why is it so choppy?
We don't need those teammates. Oh, there's Grim.
Killing me, Twitch. I just fed you like a whole bagel. Relax, pup. Controller died. What's happening? OP, cut it out. This is ridiculous. Yo. Hello? 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 Yo.
Yeah, finally. I joined you. I think I accepted your
Yeah.
invite right as you accepted my invite, and then we both went to each other's party and then just broke it. And then I sent you an invite, then I had another invite, and then I'm like, let me wait.
Yeah.
The same thing
And I
happened.
waited because the same
And
thing, yeah.
then I figured you're probably doing
Yep.
the same thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
I just didn't. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, we must have done it like the same time. I actually got like an error message.
Yeah, I just
Where's our teammate? They left us?
Yep, he's all the way back at the beginning.
Well, that was swell of him.
He's at like the sorting factory. Oh,
See anybody?
yeah, I saw people landing with us.
Oh,
I didn't see where they landed, but
oh, god damn. I'm getting smoked from distance.
I'm coming.
Somebody's right
Come on.
here with me.
Opie, cut it out.
Where's douchebag? Why would you run off by yourself? They're climbing up top here. Nice. I'm gonna go outside because I think somebody was inside still.
Peacekeeper's finally putting some work in for me.
Alright,
Yep.
somebody's in here. I hear him. I think you're
They're
getting
right there.
I did 30.
I did
bro.
44.
That was useless.
And I
Here comes some robot. Up there outside. I'll try to keep locking the door.
alright, fast guy's down.
They're inside. They're behind you. They're behind you. Someone else, another squad is shooting them.
Alright, robot's down, that squad's down. Yeah, new squad's here. I'm about to die.
Alright, let's get
Yeah.
out of here. I'll send my decoy to hopefully distract them a little bit. I sent it to us like peeking out the side of the door.
I need heals.
Alright, we should just run further,
Yeah.
I think. Because we'll probably die looking for heals. Oh, never mind. I was like, somebody's following
There's
me.
that weird little fast guy. I'm down.
Kill him! No.
They sniped me from all the
Got
way over
sniped.
there.
Yeah, I crawl around this corner right here if you can.
I'm serpentining now and they can't hit me.
Tuck in. And then, here. No, further. Alright, and then we'll just run fast as shit.
Alright.
Do sneak moves and stuff. Oh, God, I'm getting shot at too. Oh, man, these bullets are flying. I'm just running. I'm running this way, actually, back here. There's a jump tower up there. Maybe we can, like, fly to salvation. Oh, man, there's, like, still bullets, but their aim's bad, because I don't think they moved up any. I'm still shooting from a million miles away. I have a turbocharger.
No.
Energy gun.
Peacekeeper and an RE-45.
What's that noise?
Somebody zipping.
Alright, let's not follow them.
They're still sniping at us.
Oh, god damn. But they have
Yeah.
badass aim from that far. Jesus Christ. They're flying to us right there. Shit. Oh god, they're shooting at me.
Yeah. Just
you fighting
keep
them?
on running. Keep on running. I ran up the hill because I figured down the hill we're like fish in a barrel. And they rubbed out. Hope you go lay down. Thanks, HGX Zorro, you fucker.
Yeah. Some of these douchebag ass teammates. Oh man, I died all by myself real fast.
Yeah, man, it was insane. Like last night, after you got off, it was just like teammate after teammate was the same thing for me and Zero.
Yeah. Yeah, I just had to. I was all video gamed out. I was like playing for so long. I just couldn't even play any longer.
That's what he said.
And I started drinking early while I was playing too. Yeah, I told him to tell you bye. I just had to go to the bathroom, and how long did he say? So yeah, just tell him I said bye.
Opie, you're a pain in my ass, doggy.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Come on, get out from under the fucking... Thank you. There's a million things for you to do in this room. You.
Guess where we're going?
To the hellhole.
Close. Train hell.
Basically the same thing.
Alright, at least this teammate's smart enough to break off and not all land in one car.
Oh, why you making noise, Facebook?
Come on, gun, gun, gun. Give me the gun, gun, gun. There's somebody coming here. To his teammate.
Making more noise.
Yeah, they jumped off. Me and teammate were like, bitch, you don't run shit here.
I just dropped that loot thing. It's purple.
Alright.
So people are probably gonna go for it. I'm gonna just trap.
Alright.
Yep, they're at it.
Alright.
And he's down. Trap worked. Oh, somebody destroyed it though.
Did they? Oh.
Oh yeah.
I'm coming up with you. I'm coming up with you. Run towards me. You need to bail out. Oh, there's somebody behind me, I think. I'm coming to help in the fight.
Fuck. My accuracy is just so garbage.
Where are they?
They're right in my. They were right in my body. That trap worked for a second.
Oh, teammate, what the fuck? They took literally the fucking
There's a
everything out
purple.
of it.
They're
Oh.
looting my box. They just looted my box.
Well, I hear some bad guys coming, so...
Teammate just, I think, just stole a purple bag out of my box.
That was literally my last bullet. I'm double light. Literally my last bullet killed him. Which one's your box up?
Yeah, it was
I'll bring you back
purple.
real quick.
Teammate has a purple bag, I think. That was mine.
I got a purple box out of purple bag, or was this best? There's a couple purple things out of the last dude I killed. Let's see. Yeah, teammate has a purple bag. Yep, he probably stole your shit.
He did. I watched him
Damn,
do
yeah,
it.
I'm still double light with fucking 56 bullets. Is it energy gun? Oh, is it stuck fire? Oh, you said I need a backpack. Found a hemlock. So there's still some other boxes around here, I think. There should be a shield in one of those boxes. I got level 4 out of the one box, so it should be level 1.
Yeah, bro. On his motherfucking own.
Damn, they got all those shields and shit out of there too. I couldn't tell what I was getting. The teammate was getting. He's fucking raping everything. I'm gonna check these bins out over here. Some light bullets. Do you have any shield cells? I just found 2 little ones.
No, I don't have any shield cells.
Oh my god, are you really trying to grab shit out of the bins I'm opening? Fucking loser ass teammate. Nice. Oh my god, and I was oh no.
Yeah, he's 100% on his own.
Yo, give me that fucking give me the 301, you fucking homo. Yo, fuck him, dude. He was trying to take a gun, so I switched, accidentally picked up a flatline for the 301, then he took the 301, I dropped it as soon as I dropped it. And he got the purple mag that dropped with it, too. I did have an extra one, because I was going to give it to you. Yeah, I'll take that. Fuck that, dude. Let him fucking die. What a bitch. Like, dude. What a piece of shit. People like that.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Contact hostile? Oh, man, yeah, let me come save you, you bitch. Could use that. But if he if he goes down, we should just let him die. Oh, shit. What the fuck? What is somebody doing up there? I'm freezing.
CLG Mechanic says, can I get my perp bag back?
Where are they shooting from over here? What the fuck? There's somebody in the field over there.
Damn, I'm getting lit up from everywhere.
Yep. Yep, I don't have any shield cells, so that's cool. Whatever, I'm ready to get into a different match anyway. Fuck this dude.
Alright, 2 of them are down.
There's someone shooting from like up there. And I don't have any more heals. They got a purple shield.
I need to shield up. Let teammate
Yeah, I
die.
just punched him out from behind a rock.
I'll take a shit. So 2 people are down. There's still somebody crawling around. Right? I had 3 kills. I only got 1. Here they are. That's up. Wait, there's somebody creeping up behind them.
Alright. I just got a text. I was probably...
They were heading heading towards this way.
Kim.
They were going from right to left towards this direction. They kept on teammates somehow. I don't see them. I hear footsteps though. They're right here. What the fuck? They just ran out there. Nice.
I'm grabbing all the shit.
Yeah, no fucking anything for homo.
Yeah, I grabbed those heals so teammate couldn't get them. So Zero just logged on, but I just got a text message.
Yeah, I
It
could
was
use
probably
shield cells.
Kim. I gotta play Overwatch at some point with Kim. So
Yeah.
yeah. What's up, Mr. Zero?
Alright. Yeah, what's up, Zero? We need to run like this. Did we loot that last
We
week's
were
box?
until this
Yeah,
fucking shitty teammate is just snatching everything from us. So
yeah, like, oh, so since I... You know what? Do you have a light
yeah,
on,
I'm
Joe?
double light.
Yeah, I actually... Yeah. There's people right here.
All right, I'm gonna need it.
I think I can hit her. Hold on. Oh, she moved. I hit her. Bitch. 139 for this dude. Oh, that grenade will definitely get him.
I hit him with the grenade.
Nice. Oh, shit.
It's a new squad.
That was awesome. She was standing still. I tried to hit her. She ran back out and I still hit her. That's gonna be
I threw a grenade. It's probably too late to make a clip of that, but I'm gonna try. Where's my Twitch? Yeah, this is all just taking too long. I'm probably not gonna be able to make a clip of it.
So the two grenades you threw, the first one killed her, the second one knocked her down, or killed her when she was crawling.
No, the first one actually hit somebody who was already hurt. And it killed them.
Because I downed the Wraith and then shot the robot, but I didn't get a kill for that whole tunnel. So maybe you killed. It didn't kill the person you downed?
I don't know. What the fuck? What is making noise here? Why is there voice?
I'm hearing that. I was surprised I was able to hear it.
I think it's the clip you made.
Everything is mute. What the fuck is happening? Everything is just...
That was literally what
right,
you said.
but everything
a minute ago or something.
says that it's muted. I'm so confused. Alright, it stopped, but... there's three...
You have two sets of speakers hooked up?
No, just one.
Or a monitor with speakers? Okay. Sometimes, like, my computer will get confused as to which... If it's, like, I've got an HDMI going to my TV, which is hooked to speakers, which it plays through, but then it's got actual speakers hooked to the back of it, and the fucking audio thing will sometimes get confused in it.
Yeah, I have, yeah. There's four things that sound could have been coming from. The clip, my Twitch, the clip, which is also like another Twitch tab, Mixer, and then Facebook. They're all open. So, but they were muted. So I was so confused as to why anything was making any noise.
Yeah, and the Xbox doesn't like replay a clip when it takes it. So.
Yep.
And you're doing a Twitch clip
Yeah.
anyway, right?
So I have no idea. Very confusing.
Some of that weird shit.
Weird ass shit going on in there.
iced tea.
I know what you're looking for. I'm in.
You gotta do some wraith damage and 3 octane kills.
Yeah, I gotta look at what I gotta do. No ideas.
Dude, my character select screen is lagging.
It's a good start to the night.
Yeah, I've never seen that shit before. Like the progress bar would jump back in time like a quarter second or something and then keep proceeding. Let's see what happens. Maybe it'll give me superpowers.
I've seen that happen and I never got superpowers.
Well, hopefully.
I think I'll have to reboot my shit after this game. It just takes a couple minutes. Yeah, it's acting real weird.
As far as I can tell, it doesn't look like anybody's going this way. How do we get in this building? I don't even know where the door is.
Me neither, but I saw
Oh, it's one of these dealies.
saw Ben I wanted to go for.
Some extra white vest in there.
I'm going for the sky penis.
Charge rifle in there.
Yeah, I think we're alone. Normally the sky penis is the first place looted.
Think we're alone now. Something, something, something. Alone now.
That's an excellent rendition
I think
of
so.
nonsense.
Who does that song?
Yeah, man.
Oh, Prowler? Oh, sweet.
Sky.
Yeah, if I find Select Fire, that'd be fucking awesome. So that's in the middle.
Yeah,
of
it's inside the shaft of the, or I guess the scrotum of the sky penis.
Yeah.
Select fire right there.
The scrotum. Oh shit.
All praise to
Anybody want
sky
a
penis.
Peacekeeper?
No. I did really good with Peacekeeper our first game, but shoot a loot bitch.
Right. Empty this building.
I hear
out.
shit in the
I'm all-
distance.
Yeah, what's behind me?
Yeah. Like, I guess west.
Level 2 knockdown shield over here. If anybody's
it's
into that
over the
weird
hill.
shit.
I love weird shit.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know, bro.
The weirder the better.
Yeah, I don't need 2 Phoenix kits. Somebody can have the Phoenix kit. I'm just looting this train station. I'm coming back.
Alright, I'm coming for that Prowler.
Here's Select Fire.
Yeah. Alright.
Oh, you just got one, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, there's one right over here by the Prowler I'm running to. Like almost. Pretty basically next to it.
What do I drop for that? What do I drop for that? I don't know. I'm gonna drop grenades for it.
Oh, gold, baby.
Gold what?
Noise.
Gold what? Gold what? Gold what?
Body
Vest.
armor.
Yeah. Cool.
Wrist barrier.
Phoenix kit. Not telling
I
anybody. about
pinged
Phoenix
it, bro.
kits,
I
Joe.
actually dropped it and said I don't need 2 Phoenix
did you?
kits. One of y'all can have it if you're into that weird shit.
Dude, I heard somebody zipping. Oh shit. I'm way far
Alright.
away from you guys.
Actually,
I'm coming to you. Somebody zipped close to me.
I'm coming, Mr. Zero.
we're on the way.
Don't zip near my friend.
I'm coming to you guys actually. Y'all are going
Forgot
toward
who I
the.
was.
We need to head toward.
But
the
we're coming to
circle
make
here.
sure you can get here safely.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to come back
Yeah,
here.
we're together now.
All in together now.
All right.
But also, I would like to just go there and fight them. I just want to use my portal. I never use it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I don't see anybody.
No, I heard a zip line for sure, like close by, but that
Oh
was
yeah,
like
I'm sure
close
there's
to that
somewhere.
building. I thought it was one of you guys, but
Then you realize
they have to come towards us for the ring.
oh, that's true.
Oh, we can do the sneak move. But I can't really see anything.
The sneaky snake. Yeah, I can't either. I want to say it was that building, but it might have been like that one.
so. You're saying it definitely wasn't that one, or that one.
Right.
What about that one? Could it have been that one?
I'm confused now.
I'm gonna watch. I'm gonna watch
Actually,
that
If you were
Could've been,
with
Joe.
me,
I think I was on the roof of it, so it could have been that one.
yeah, I think it might have been that one. 'Cause that's where I came from, and you were in the same building as me.
Yeah, and it was
I think maybe it was the
definitely
green
a zip
eye
line,
one.
but
I don't know. Like, I look for
I
him,
didn't
you
hear
wanna
like,
move on?
oh, maybe so, yeah. I didn't hear anybody in the building after I heard the zip line.
The ring's almost here, so they're gonna have to move if they're in there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the ring's almost here. Yeah, we should not push on that. Man. But keep an eye out.
I need a couple of
I'll
shield
let you
cells.
out, dude.
I'm okay.
I got 4 little ones. Oh, do you need a Phoenix get 0? I just realized I already had one.
Yeah, I got one. I got one. Thanks. I got
well,
good
I got
heals.
a blue bag. I can hold one, but for now, or whatever. Not seeing anybody yet.
Sneaky snakes.
These heavy bullets. God,
There you go.
Chingy.
Barrel stabilizer. Yeah. Oh,
Ah,
guess
shit.
we found those bad guys.
Somebody's. Yeah, all the way back there.
Up on that cliff.
Need to recharge my shield.
Oh yeah, did you have shield cells? I could use some.
I don't have any. I've got 1X sights. Let those bitches come
I
get
got 2
some.
little ones.
Shield cells, yes.
Come grab some. I only got 2 little ones left.
Yeah, if anybody sees any kind of zoom sight, I could use it.
Okay.
Even a
Alright.
4.8.
Okay, doggy.
I'm gonna do some portal shit. You can go
Oh,
murder.
hell yeah.
Alright, I'm gonna get down there and get ready for the portal shit.
Oh shit. Okay.
I might be leading us
Yeah,
into the
I'm
storm.
right behind
Nope. Yeah, I'll lead us into this building. It's a decent portal. Here's a 3-axe.
Here.
Oh, thanks. Oh, to the yes.
Got a 301 now, also, which is a good thing. Are they on this building that we're in? I don't know.
No, they were on a cliff. They were on a cliff edge.
I didn't see
Way
exact-
in the distance.
yeah, I don't have any sand stuff. I could use some of that shit.
I'm gonna see if I can
Where is that,
look at
down
the
Yeah,
cliff.
there's like 6
Uh,
syringes.
Well,
think-
I heard a portal.
I think
Was
they were
that
over
them
there.
going through our portal?
It might have been. I'm going to the roof.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with Grim because he's.
Oh,
I think he's
oh
about
yeah.
to fight him.
They're
you
definitely,
getting-
yep, they're over there.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Sniping at you? Like there's people below us too. Oh, you're a robot. Can you do a
They're-
cool zip line or something?
Yeah. Oh shit. I don't know where to zip to though, because they'll blow our ass off that zip line.
We have to
trying
go
get
that
them.
way. So maybe if we roll this way. do a
Yeah,
zip,
yeah.
Like, over to that building or just.
Good, I'm gonna lay down some cover fire so you
Yeah,
can
they
do that.
Okay. Yep. Here we go.
Where are they? Up on that
Yeah.
cliff thing?
Yep.
Well, the ring's moving in, so let them burn to death. We should move
Yeah.
in, and
We
then
might ought to fuck them up. Oh, we gotta wait.
we
until-
get turn. Yeah, not too far, but we can always turn around and just, you know.
Yeah, we
Keep
might.
them from
I think
coming
we'll
in.
have to. They might have a travel character too.
Yeah, what up, Pat? Welcome to the show of shit. Where the shit gets shown.
Not really much cover around here.
Yeah, I'm not really sure where to go. Oh, this is where we got ambushed the other
no.
day, ain't it?
It all looks the same.
The people are fighting over there somewhere. Trying to look for a good place we can fight them without getting sniped in the back by the other people.
Yeah, maybe behind that rock.
That could work.
Or maybe toward the fucking frozen
If we
city.
edge the circle,
You can go wherever.
Yeah. Still
get a good
11 other squads.
edging going. Yeah.
Damn, it's a
If
little
nothing
ass
else,
circle
we can-
for 11
Yeah.
whole squads. There's 30 people. Look how small this circle is.
Wow.
That's
If nothing
crazy.
else, we can find another place to go from up here, maybe. Maybe. Oh, there's death boxes up here. There might be dudes
Same
up
people.
here.
Over there. You want to go? You want to go fuck them up? They're on the edge of the ring. So you can, you know.
There's two purple death boxes and a gold one up on top of this rock. If you want to see if
I'm
they
hearing
got
somebody
gear.
else.
Yeah, I just threw my
Okay.
my jump pad so we can get up here.
You see them?
So we can
Trying
get up there
climb
to look at the boxes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trying to climb up that shit. Oh, yeah, they're shooting at us. Alright. I'm Wraith Portal.
All right.
So.
Oh shit, to them? Okay.
I'm right. I'm with you, Zero. Let's rock and roll.
Oh god damn it. I'm almost dead. I'm doing a quick phoenix.
Oh shit! There's people to the north too. I'm down. Fudge sandwiches.
Got one down. Crawl through the
Oh
portal.
yeah, good
Joe.
call. Good call. Good call.
Right here.
No, no, never mind. Never mind. Got two down.
Nice.
All three down.
Hell to the yizzle. I'm getting Joe up.
Alright.
Thank you, sir.
Am I hearing something? I don't know.
Only you can tell us if you're hearing something.
Got 40 seconds
Am I
till the
crazy?
ring beam moving. Here's a death box.
One up there. Where was the other
No
two down here?
shield. Yeah, near the wall. Near the wall. Oh shit.
Yeah, here's the one. Where's the other two? Zero?
Toward the over in that direction.
Fuck,
I didn't
16
see him
seconds.
exactly,
Shit.
but. Oh shit! I got no
Oh,
shields.
oh.
Can one of y'all drop me
There's
some
one
Yeah.
over here.
shield bat? Maybe this guy's got some. No, he don't. I can
there's
zip us the
two
fuck
little-
out.
Yeah,
of
I'll
here.
bring them to you, Zero.
Okay. Where's the other box?
Okay.
Oh, shit, you're
back
here.
I'll pick up
Okay.
what shields I got first.
Yeah, let's.
I'm throwing a
Two
zip.
little ones. Oh no.
I'm finding a place to throw a zip.
All right, I'll drop them as soon as we get.
Ah! I thought I could.
Okay.
I thought I could use the bounce pad while I was doing my void mode
Alright.
thing. You cannot.
Here.
Thank you. You need some meds.
Alright. Oh, it's Phoenix
Joe-
kit. Oh, you already healed up. Alright.
Joe,
so
you
for
need help?
shields,
No,
I got a big one and two
I'm
little
good.
ones. I can give you two little ones.
Yeah, just toss me a little one.
That's all. So
You-
now I
you
just
need
got
No,
a
I'm
big
good.
one.
Yeah.
Grim?
I have two Phoenix kits and one big thing. Well, Zero,
Oh,
here,
okay,
take a Phoenix kit, and then in
Okay.
5 seconds you'll fully heal everything because you got the gold shit.
Yeah,
I'd
yeah,
rather have the
thanks.
two little ones
Here, you want to
than the
let
extra
me
Phoenix
toss a
kit.
med kit.
I got 3 of them. Joe,
Yeah, I got
Okay.
one of them, but I can.
Oh, I can't. I'm gonna.
We'll just
I
kill
had to
people
do
and
that
get
too.
their
Okay.
stuff.
Oh no, I can throw that shit away. I'll
Okay.
take one of those unless you need it. It don't. You can have
No,
it.
I'm good. I got 2 of those. some small ones, some small shields.
Anybody want a? Oh, actually, never mind. Yeah, well, yeah. Does anybody want a 3x? I got a.
Yeah, I'll take it if you don't want it.
I have another,
Here you go.
thing.
So there's a
I'll see if I can get a portal.
1x. If anybody needs a 1x, there's a 1x.
There's 5 other squads left in this ship, boys. You want to get in this building?
They're about to zip in. I just saw a line come out.
Oh, okay, okay. To us, you mean? Or into
Right
that
there.
building?
Well,
They're zipping
from
down
there
now.
to the people that they were shooting at there.
But there,
Oh, yeah.
there is a squad up there that's shooting
Let's
at them.
go through the building to meet them. We don't have
Okay.
long. I mean, we don't have to.
I mean,
it's a
As good of a
suggestion.
plane as any.
30 seconds remain. The ring is nearby.
I bet somebody might be right behind us. You want to wait till the circle
Right there.
gets. Okay.
Somebody just peeped out.
Okay. I'm looking. Oh, the
People
fucking
fighting
train
over
just
there,
pulled
too.
in. Can we get? How do you get upstairs? Okay.
I'm creeping up these steps slow, just in case
Oh
there's
shit. Okay. Me too.
somebody
me
up
too.
here. Because I feel like if someone's hiding out, they'd be hiding out up here.
Yeah. I think
Yes,
you're
they
right.
are hiding out up here.
Okay.
All right, I'm on. Oh shit, I'm on. Can run up the other steps. So I'm already up here.
Oh, I missed.
One's down.
All right, I'm healing up. 3 seconds. Coming up.
All right, well, the robot's down. There's still 2 up though. Fuck, man, she melted me.
Oh, there's another squad. Some bitch behind you. Behind you, Zero.
Oh hell.
This wraith right here. Damn. Yeah, that
goddamn.
wraith melted me like 0 seconds flat.
Yeah,
I feel
was
like we're
shooting
ready
her
for a
bitch,
little rain.
and now I'm getting shot in the back by her.
Yeah, I'm down for some
Running.
rant.
I thought I was going to get that bitch, but
I'm down
I
for
was
two.
shooting
I'm gonna
pretty
smoke a
good,
cigarette
but-
first. So I'll be
Okay.
on.
Alright,
Shortly.
alright, alright, alright.
Alright, alright, alright.
man, I was shooting good, man, but I failed right as soon as that last fucking guy shot me.
I am not shooting good, but I wasn't expecting to, so.
I was shooting good at that rock battle. Fucked a couple of dudes up with headshots with that.
I mean, I shot
3X.
those rocks pretty good.
I should have kept that 3x, but yeah. The fucking, I thought that 2 to 4. I thought I needed it because of the fucking dudes that were way far away from us before the circle kept tightening up. But no, that 3x is pretty good when you use it.
Yeah, I like it. I'm a fan. It's I like it because it's more open than the other ones.
Yeah, it is nice. I guess that's a good way to balance it.
Alright, so I guess I'll be him again. Alright. I was just about to say, I guess I'll start playing somebody that I play in rank. So either like Wraith, that's where I start to pick, or Lifeline, and before I could decide, it chose for me. So
Yeah, I hate it when that happens.
congratulations, you played yourself.
Also, did you figure out if you start Monday?
No, I haven't heard from him yet. So I don't know. Yeah, he's got to send me something about
Fucking
orientation,
straight up.
and yeah. That hasn't come in yet. Yeah.
2 more days to hear. Oh damn! I didn't know I was doing that.
Ooh, Spitfire. I don't know what my challenges are. I need to look up my challenges. Oh, loot bitch.
Can you look at them while you're in game?
No. Normally you can look at your dailies, but you can only see, the special event ones. So there's a, oh, you already have a blue shield. I just picked a vault key.
Thanks.
So we should go do
Oh,
that.
nice. Yeah.
That'll be fun stuff.
Where that vault
Vault
is.
B, the closest vault is right below the train yard. There's one right above the geyser. Over there.
Whichever one you want to go to, I'm right behind you. I've got
Alright, the closest one is the train yard, and it is the way we gotta go, and it's the only one that's in the next circle.
Alright. Nice.
So hopefully the shit don't get yeah, hopefully the shit don't get looted by the time we get there. Alright.
I guess I don't know which is closest. I'm behind you, left or right, either one around this rock. It's about the same.
Yeah, let's
really,
go
I think.
left just where we're closer to teammate. We'll just all go through the John. We'll go through the John.
Oh,
You know, that's how us Philadelphians speak, because we...
I was watching Men in Black the other day. It's just on Netflix, you know, it's just something to turn on, and I didn't notice it. I thought Will Smith said, or maybe it's Men in Black 2 or something, I don't know, but I thought he was calling a car a joint, but he says John.
Yeah, man. He's the Fresh Prince of somewhere.
Scientology. Fresh Prince of Philadelphia Scientology.
Yeah. He's a Scientologist, is he?
I think I don't know if he is or not, but he's not still married to Jada Pinkett Smith, I don't think. I think her or one of his former wives or something was, and he might have just been like, he's not going to talk bad about it because he don't want to, you know, piss her off.
Or piss the church off and have the fucking church ruin your life.
Yeah, assassinate him or something.
You ever see The Path? That might be a Netflix thing. I don't know. Or Hulu.
Is that about Scientology? Is that Leia Remini?
No, it's well, her show is good. Leia Says It All or whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah.
But so yeah, that's a good show. But The Path is a fictional show about a religion that's basically based off of Scientology. They have a lot of the same practices, but it's a little bit different. It's oh shit, somebody opened it since.
Oh fuck. I'm ready to
Shit,
kill.
I didn't recheck it. Fuck. Alright.
Is there any other? Well, nothing.
No,
in the ring,
there's that one, but we're not gonna make it in time. Shit.
Man, that sucks. They must be close
Yeah.
by. I mean, I would think it didn't take too long. They went down this way, apparently, or that way, one way or the other.
Shit, that sucks.
But yeah. Is it
Yeah,
pretty
so
good?
instead of like the path or the bridge or whatever they call it in Scientology, they call it the ladder that they climb. And it's not as like money hungry as like Scientology is, where like you have to pay all this money for all these courses and do all this shit. But it's yes, it's very cult-like. It's really good. It's got Jesse.
Oh shit. Where they
I'm not
at?
sure.
Okay.
I'm going through this building.
Shit, what was that? Broke one of their shields, hit him for 22 more.
Okay. Can I get a ping?
He ran behind
Okay.
that building. I don't know where that fucking grenade is coming from. Oh, two more up there.
Come on, man. Get your shit together, bro.
Indeed.
Oh, I definitely not have my shit together. I just like bounced myself backwards. Oh my god, I'm fucking... I'm clowning myself over here.
I'm down, yeah.
I'm shooting like shit. Oh my god.
Who knows what our teammate was doing too? It's like he probably out damaged us both or something. Nope. He did 23. He landed 1 or 2 rounds.
He was probably like fucking them up. Nope. He did 20 damage.
He probably punched the Gibraltar. No, the Gibraltar was outside. Gibraltar tasted my 9-9.
Dude, my accuracy is fudged up.
Oh, here's Grim.
Okay, nope, we're about to start a new one. Just sent you an invite. Hop on in on this sexy gun train.
So,
Oh, you want a rank?
Yes.
Yeah, we can do that.
Put some stank on the rank.
Stank on the rank. Stank on the rank. Stank on the rank.
We're all going now, aren't we?
So I just saw the clip you posted, Joe. Did you actually clip it, or did you just have to find it in your records or whatever? Remember we were talking about it before, and I was like, "Didn't you clip that thing?" And you're like, "No, I never clipped that."
Yeah, I didn't know what you were talking about. No, yeah, I found it. I've had it for a couple days, and now I don't remember if I found it or if I actually clipped it back then. But
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, because what I meant was to just go in Xbox, but then you can't post it if you clip it in Xbox.
No.
You can't just make it on thing. So you'd have to find in the actual footage or whatever. Right?
Yeah, Xbox is such a pain in the ass. Like, if I paid for like Microsoft's version of Google Drive or whatever, which I don't think it's a lot of money, but like I don't have spare income to throw away. But if I had that, then I could just do a clip on Xbox, then I could send it over there, download it, do whatever I want with it. But since I don't, I can like only send a link to it. So like I can go on the website or on the app or whatever and like get a copy, a link to it, and I can just post a link places.
What if when you have the Xbox clips, you just watch them, but then like stream it so it's recording it, so then you can clip it, the rewatch. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I could do that.
That's a pretty good.
Just if there's
good
something
idea.
you really want to get,
Yeah.
you can do that. Watch it in the Xbox, but you're screen capturing, and then use that clip.
Yeah.
That's using the
Yeah, I could do
Dolphin.
that if like I wasn't streaming and I needed there was something that
right.
we wanted a clip of. Could definitely do that. First game of ranked.
People use your brain to gain, as Ice Cube says.
Yeah, Ice Cube's a smart mofo.
Get brain while you game.
Yeah, that's even better.
Yeah, always better.
I'm going to that one that I pinged.
I'm gonna land. You guys can land on the far ones. I'll try to land on this
Okay.
side one.
I'll land on the one Joe didn't ping.
Alright. Oh,
I mean, on
I'm
his
fighting
side.
somebody for shit. Oh shit.
Oh yeah, somebody's in here with me.
Oh shit.
There's nothing.
Oh, he jumped off. He left his med kit. He jumped off and left the fucking med kit. Oh, somebody else is here. Fuck.
What?
All right, and I'm down.
Oh, all I have as a longbow. I'll try.
Oh shit, I got them all
God,
around me.
somebody
Nah,
around
play
me.
smart. This is right. Play smart.
Ooh, yeah.
Guy-
played
guy
smart
above
with
you?
Some bullets to the brain. Oh god. Oh, you don't have a gun, do you, bitch? Oh, that guy. Goddamn, that's guy number 4 I've been fighting.
Somebody's punching
I guess
zero.
we did have 2 squads with us, most definitely. Yeah, yeah.
Give me your shit.
And there's
oh
another-
God, no! Stop shooting me, man!
It'll be okay, Zero. Come hold my
That
hand.
fucking
It'll be
asshole.
okay.
I don't like that race thing. It took too long to start and too long to get out of.
Dude, there might have been 3 squads with us.
I was a lot.
I shot like at 4 guys or something, or maybe that first guy was the dude that jumped out and left his med kit. But I downed 1, and then there were 3 more dudes fighting, I think.
Oh, you shot at the guy that left the med kit in my car?
Am I done the race down?
I shot a. I don't. No. I shot at him, but I never shot him. No, wait. Maybe I did. Yeah, the guy that jumped out, but not. Dude, I don't know. I think I shot at the guy that downed you as you were going out of the car.
Oh, okay.
And then I downed a guy that was hiding in a fucking little side thing, but I think he had a 99, and I dodged his shit and busted him up.
Yeah, there was it was a robot with the new blue skin. He came in, I don't know, I guess he had a scout or whatever, and I picked up a wingman. And we traded a little bit, but the wingman hits harder, so after 2 shots of that, he was leaving and didn't stop to grab the med kit on his way down. And then I want to say a Watson came in, or a Wraith maybe, with the energy gun and just wraithed my face with her big long gun.
That's the one I hit, but didn't
They
kill.
put it in your
Uh-huh.
race hole.
I broke their shield. And the other one probably didn't even have a shield, since you hit him with the wingman. I mean, unless you broke it.
I don't-
Unless you
no, I
almost
don't
had
think
your
he picked
shield
up a
broke,
shield.
And then I just popped him once or twice.
So I think I hit him twice with the wingman, which is 90. I think. Or maybe
Yeah.
I only hit him once.
That's satisfying when you get
Mhm.
some wingman hits in a row. you know?
Yeah.
It's satisfying when you get one, but more so.
I
when
got a
you
longbow
know, you're
shot
effective.
this game.
Oh,
So
nice.
I'm usually I mean, I missed the first 2, but got the 3rd one. And then
Was
I
it
killed
aiming
somebody
down
with a
sight?
peacekeeper. 1 shot, which
Nice.
that is exciting for me. It's, you know, it doesn't really happen. And it must have been a headshot, because, so, all I did was I hit him once with some robot. I don't know if it's the same robot. I did 225 damage or something like that. I hit him for 45, and then I killed the dude with the 1 shot of the peacekeeper. And then I hit the next dude.
Nice.
So I guess that means the other guy, I did, I don't know, 175 damage or so with the peacekeeper. It must have been a headshot.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah. I mean, and that was the first peacekeeper shot. And that shit never happens. That is gratifying as well. Usually I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, miss 8 peacekeeper shots, land 7 damage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that peacekeeper's a bitch.
I don't.
Was that an aim down side on the longbow?
Yeah, all I had first I just had a longbow. Shot the dude with the longbow once. And then I ran in and I found a peacekeeper. I'm like, yeah, I'll be better with this, even though I'm not good at it. But finally wasn't super terrible with the peacekeeper.
Yeah, Peacekeeper's a lot of fun when you shoot, when you pop them and
When
yeah.
you're good at it, it's fucking awesome.
and you see like
Yeah.
50
Yeah, I
or
get
better
pooped on
damage
all
pop
the
up. It's
time.
like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about, Willis.
Well, when you one hit with peacekeeper, oh, that's a good feeling.
It is. Willis knows all about that.
Willis is always doing that shit.
There you go.
I need guns.
I-
Oh, 45?
Yeah, I just pinged that longbow for you, bro.
Oh, the longbow. Fuck out here with the longbow. I'll take the 45.
I'll take
Yeah.
the longbow. If you don't
Right
want it.
now I got a Mosaic beacon. I'm really not trying to have a Mosaic beacon.
I'm having a lot
What is
better
this?
luck killing people now that I aim for the head.
Yeah, aim small, miss
Oh,
small,
empty
sir.
ammo.
That's what my doctor told me.
That's what she said.
She is also my doctor.
Go for the gusto.
Alright. What floor is that stuff on?
Right above me. Yeah,
Is it up here?
floor you're on now. I'm pretty sure.
45.
There's a
And-
Hemlock.
There we go, scout. Oh, and then hemlock? Cool, yeah, I
Yeah.
can use that. I like me some heavy guns. I basically,
me
I realize
too.
I
Oh,
always
somebody's.
have
Oh, that's you.
heavy and
Okay.
light. That's all I ever really play with.
Yeah,
I just zipped.
Some robot being creepy again.
definitely is. Oh, somebody's shooting.
Oh, we're being aimed at.
Oh
we're
shit,
being aimed
somebody.
at. Oh,
I've got
I'm
nothing.
being laser beamed at.
Ooh, I hit him.
I don't
with
have a
46.
sight
Oh god.
on
they
any
got me back.
guns, so like.
Somebody's right here.
Oh yeah, I'm getting fucked up.
God,
Shit.
I gotta
Were
roll
they-
out.
Yeah, me too.
I'm
I got.
mangled.
Where you at, Grim? Okay, I see. Yeah, let's get the
Oh,
fuck off
down
this
here in
building.
the hole. Oh, I was just about to turn around.
Yeah,
Alright,
Peter,
I'm
no,
healing
you
up and
can't.
then I'm coming to help.
I cannot. There's one here and there's one crouched in the shit. So is this another squad besides the sniper one?
Appears
God.
that way.
Damn.
Yeah, someone's shooting at them, so it's another squad.
Well, he can fucking hit me and I can't hit him.
For shit, yeah, I couldn't hit him for shit. I really thought I was on him maybe once, but maybe not. Maybe I was just sucking. Maybe I was just sucking dick.
Ah,
Oh, they're coming up to you. He's behind a shield.
Oh, that's what you get, bitch. You get out of my dome, bro. It's my dome.
I'll
Oh,
tell you when he's
fucking run with
coming.
that dome shit.
Oh, that's your dome.
Oh, he's shielding up.
I didn't see the shit extending around me.
You're getting sniped at too.
He's still there. He's.
Last one didn't
Yeah.
pop.
Yeah, yep,
Vest,
yep,
vest,
yep, yep.
vest.
That's why I stopped that. Come grab that. Oh shit,
somebody's
comes out
running
the
around
timeout.
out here.
Fuck. My bad. My. Fuck, 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 fuck.
Yeah. That's. You didn't even hurt me, dummy.
God damn it, leave me alone,
Oh, no.
people!
I
Fuck!
I didn't even see him. I think they opened the door like as soon as you started reviving me or
Ah,
something.
man.
Good thing about being gold, you can't drop back.
Yeah. It's the best thing about being.
The
I'll be
thing
right
about
back,
being
AIP.
silver 4 is. Oh wait, never mind.
Oh damn, you're not gold yet?
I was like
I thought
4
you were-
points away. Now I'm
What? I
47
could've sworn
points
that-
away. I was
Ah.
close.
I could have sworn it just looked like you
Nah,
were
I'm
gold
gonna
when
be
we first logged into the.
Man, 4 points.
Alright.
Hey,
And
Yep.
I'll be right back.
Alright. Well, I was only Gibraltar because I had to play one game as Gibraltar, one game as Bloodhound, one game as Wraith. Some.
I can stop being Wraith after I get 46 more damage.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Then I gotta do Octane for 3 kills. I'm gonna go back.
Okay. I'm gonna get Ice Tea. I'll be right back. So, congratulations, you played yourself.
cold for a couple of weeks, but we actually got really similar temperatures right now, it sounds like, but I know it gets way colder
Yeah.
up there in the winter.
What you know about our
Oh
winters?
yeah, it gets fucking bitter cold.
Our winters are nice and
Well, I'm
hot
guessing.
and warm. They're like,
90 degrees,
yeah, man. It's that global ass warming. We got like
Oh, and plus,
fire winters.
I'm at about 1,700 feet elevation, so it's slightly colder here than
Damn,
some of
that
my
high,
surrounding area.
1700? That's pretty high. I think we might be like 30 feet or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in some of like low mountains, you know.
I said
Oh,
we didn't
okay.
hear. Heard that. Hold your breath. If you have a respiratory system.
No wonder you got internet issues. The internet can't reach that high.
Yeah. Where I used to work, it's been a while since they had this, but they had like a satellite dish on the roof that linked
Come on
up
over
with the
here.
satellite. Oh yeah, I see him. Okay.
Right next door.
Ooh, give me guns. I
Doesn't
got
look
no
like anybody's
guns.
here.
No guns
Alright, I
down
just
here.
saw Birdman pulse over
There's a
there.
white vest over here. Oh shit.
I'm
Alright,
looking for guns still.
I got an
There's no weapons in
alternator.
this fucking.
and
I'm
a
going over here for
bit.
guns.
Oh, and a trailer. Another
Me
white
too.
vest.
They're chasing us.
Oh,
They're
shit.
shooting
I'm
at me.
coming. I'm coming.
Oh,
Oh,
shit.
shit, I only have 20 bullets? Oh, god damn, there's somebody here.
I got away. I'll try to find a gun. Come
What?
back.
He
Alright, I
punched
just
me
found
down.
I just found a 45.
I'm down. Now his teammates behind him.
All right. I got a 10. I mean,
Here, zero.
You know, P20.
Spitfire and some heavy
Oh,
bullets.
thanks. Okay. I didn't know how to say the name of the weapon. I'd forgotten it.
Yep.
Thanks.
Alright, now it's time to go get the Grimster.
Hell
No
yeah.
Grim left behind. I hear footsteps. Are they upstairs?
Yep.
Alright. Yeah, let's just go for him.
Let's
I'm
get 'em, Let's
outside.
lure him out. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, here they are on the steps. Oh, I can't put down the.
Hit him for 70. He's down.
Hell yeah.
There's a
I'm with you.
drone here.
I have a vest, blue vest. Oh, they probably took it. Right there, behind that thing. See them?
Yep.
Awesome. Throwing his gate traps in there. Oh, duck and dodge.
Alright, let me heal up real quick.
This guy, I don't know. Oh, here he is. On the stairs, coming at you.
Fuck, man. I stopped healing up and just couldn't get him. There's somebody else.
Oh shit, somebody
Over
else
here?
is Oh, two more guys. Man, we couldn't get armed that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was rough.
That was rough.
Oh, Joe. So, who was I talking about it with at the party? Was it you and Kim about haunted hayride or something?
Yeah, yes. I believe so.
And then she said
November
something
1st.
like which is Friday, right?
I guess. I don't know.
And is that a definite?
I
or
don't
what?
know. I believe it is. I believe that that's when we're going.
Because me and Janine were talking about doing that, like, I don't know, a couple weeks ago or whatever. And then so I asked her, like, I don't know, yesterday, like, what was the day? And
It's
'cause
not
she
this
was-
Friday, by the way.
When I, the one, not tomorrow or 2 days from now, the one after. So, when I talked about it, she's like, oh, I'm gonna have to talk to Kim, and I think it's good for Nicole later, because she's away, and then she was gonna talk to everybody, and then, she was under the impression, when I talked to her last night, she was under the impression that, I don't know, Kate Helm and either Kim or Nicole, I forget, had plans, and she wasn't sure if she was officially invited, something like that. So I don't know if they
What?
talked about it. I don't know how she heard about it, but then felt not invited, because I felt like, why would Kid Helm being invited.
I don't know. I don't know what this official invite fucking bug that everybody has. Tara's pulled that like twice. Said some shit about like,
What about the?
Yeah, well, that was the first time, and then just at the Halloween party, she was like, when they were calling in for.
You literally said it in the group chat. Like,
Right, I do. Well, it wasn't necessarily officially invited, but it was like the invite wasn't like long enough or something. I don't fucking know. She was like, she's like, oh, we haven't been talking about it for months. I'm like, yes, we have. Like, it's been in conversation for months.
But even then, do you have to talk for it?
And she's like, well, and then she's like, no, I looked in the group chat and it was like, it was 10 days ago that it was first brought up, and I'm like, right, but we were told, like, we had conversations about it in person forever.
And they don't have anything.
Right, like, and then like she just did that at the Halloween party when like everybody was called into the haunted house for the picture, and she's like, she's like,
that's right.
no one, yeah, they called these people by name, and no one called me or Doogie by name, so we didn't go.
Obviously, everybody's going in. I'm in and that bin. And
Okay.
Do it. That one.
All right,
No wait.
I'm going to the one I pinged.
I was getting drowned out with that building over there.
Going to this.
Tell what was what. Wait, what the hell is going on? Why am I fucking this bitch? What?
I don't know.
What?
You were her.
Sure I
You were her in the
back.
lobby.
No,
Yeah.
was I? Oh, I meant to switch it back to my regular guy. What the fuck? Is that you guys?
Yeah, we were just zipping by each other.
Not me.
Me and you were, Grim.
I fail.
Loot bitch that I'm gonna shoot out of the sky in 3, 2,
See somebody?
1, and shoot the loot bitch. It's purple.
Luke bitch got right.
6X, baby, take it.
I was hoping there'd be a vault key, but there'd be no vault key.
Sounds like you guys know a touchy Tara.
Yeah.
Dewey.
Do we ever? Yep. Let's never mind that.
Ooh, I'm gonna drop my scout.
I'm like picking everything up. I don't need that. Prala SMG here.
Blue body on
Right like SMG.
with a hat too.
Is there a thing behind that prowler? It looks like there's some purple behind it. It was a second
No.
card now.
I dropped about, I don't know, 60 or 80 rounds of light or something where I marked.
God damn it, that's twice that happened. No, I can live. I have 100. Plus what's in my guns.
Joe, there's a blue
I
body
got-
on
Oh
it.
yes, thank
right.
you. No, I'm good. I just found another. I just found another box. I got 117 now,
Yeah,
so
There
I'm
you go.
good.
I was just marking that armor. I didn't mean let's go this way.
There's a whole 100.
No, I'm good. I got 117 plus what's in the guns. I'm good.
Oh, I'm gonna keep the hemlock, I guess.
Alright, then I'll prove that shit up.
Yeah, I still, man, if you're up close to him, that R99 just
Yeah,
fucks
fucks them real good.
Yeah.
All right, so I got some heavy bullets if somebody wants it.
Right in the gas.
him. What'd you say? What
Is
you
this
got?
a train?
Yeah, it's a train.
What's that noise? The train's here.
So there's that. No, it's not, okay. Train's leaving
That's the
already.
train? Oh, I can't climb up there.
If you go up here,
I'll zip us.
Can we stop
Somebody
the
might
train?
have
I'll
shot
try.
us.
Oh, nobody was on here.
I hit the brakes. I don't know if we want to.
I'm dropping the 99.
Oh, I didn't get any loot. You guys are stealing the loot. Stop stealing the loot. Loot stealers.
Oh, that's cool that you can stop
Give me
the
the loot.
train.
Give me the loot.
Oh, I didn't realize it would stop immediately. So I guess it's like depending on the speed it has. Oh, look at all the purples.
Purple nurples.
Ready? Boom. Level 2 heavy mag.
Where's the brake that you hit?
It's on the front. All the way up. All the way
you
up to the
went, okay.
captain's quarters.
I thought you hit one back here.
That's a good thing we hopped on the train. It wasn't looted, and there was a bunch of sweet shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's a couple more bins beside it. Hell yeah.
This gets better.
Alright, here, so I'm dropping. I'm double light, so I don't need this. Heavy.
Do I not have any little shields? What? Why do I have nothing? Oh, it's have 2 Phoenix kits. That's why.
Oh shit, train be moving. I'll pick up this heavy.
Sure.
Hop on?
Yeah. Grim, do you need 2 boxes of heavy?
I got 180. Right now, I have light as primary. So
Okay, that's about what I'm. We're pretty much even.
Cool. Alright, so we're dead center circle pretty much on those. And everything's not
cool.
even looted. Oh, that's looted over there. I see a bin open.
I see a care package ahead of us that's not on the map, but I see the light in the sky.
Do I go
Yeah,
over there?
let's see. I don't know why it's not on the map.
I think I was hearing some sort of charged rifle action back there.
Alright, are we hopping off?
So where do
Yeah.
we jump off here? Yeah.
Yeah, this stuff was
George,
looted.
is that you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, where's this light at? Did it disappear? Oh, over here.
No, that's the train
Wait,
light.
what? That's
The light went
train.
out.
Wait, where the fuck's the other
What
light?
the fuck? Oh, it's open. It's right there.
Oh,
Yep,
maybe
they're up there.
somebody looted
Oh shit, yeah, dude's there.
You gonna lure him back?
I've hit one of them for.
Oh, you're almost dead, Zero. You're almost dead, bro.
Yeah, I'm healed. I broke that Watson. Watson's almost dead. If she's not healing, I hit her for 150 or so.
They're
Was
pushing.
she on you, Grim? I'm moving to Grim.
Oh shit, I think someone's up on the roof up there.
Oh, Grim, I didn't know you were Watson. Shit.
Yeah, remember? I did it back. Where are they?
I got the
Over
Watson
there?
down. Nope, down here. 2 down. Here we go. Oh,
Why
it's
am
a
I not
Mirage.
getting,
Okay.
like, healed by shit? My robot
Nice.
thing is here. My ultimate thing.
You're probably.
Is,
Here's
is
somebody
that
else.
everybody or no?
Somebody else is here. Somebody else is here. I hear shit on the metal. Oh, right over there. Oh, 2 squad. Another squad. Another squad. I broke the shield on the top, dude.
168 that is full. Oh, I'm smoking
Hell
bad.
yeah. I'm healing.
Oh.
Damn, they got me with the fucking peacekeeper. Knocked me right out of my fucking ultimate. There's 2 right there.
Oh, he's on the roof. God damn.
Oh no, that was yet another squad. I think that was a third squad. Cause didn't you down somebody out of that squad?
No, I didn't down them.
Nah, I almost did the robot, but then zipped
Oh.
away with robot shit.
Oh shit. We got
We
fucked
did.
up. We fucked that first squad up good though.
Fuck.
Hey, got some points.
Oh, but yeah,
Did
so
they-
what I was saying, Joe, I took off on that Friday. Just today. I mean, I usually need 2 weeks in advance, but I know the girl does schedule, so next week's schedule wasn't made yet, so I just, told her and she gave me off.
Okay, so you're off for the first.
Mm-hmm. Whether I'm invited or
Well, you're not officially invited, so.
I mean, I never felt like I wasn't invited.
Did you get like a crocheted fucking doily that said if you were invited?
Yeah, and if I didn't, then I wouldn't have felt like I was really invited.
That's what we're gonna have to do. Give out these motherfuckers.
Sure.
Did the lady send you her silk handkerchief as invitation?
Yep. Definitely did not happen to me.
Did some other shit for an invitation.
I was watching some old episodes of Letterman on YouTube or some shit, and actually this was just a clip, but fucking Madonna he was interviewing Madonna, and she came on set, and like when they, you know, when he'll go over and kiss a woman on the cheek or whatever and welcome him, she handed him a pair of her panties, and like when the interview
On
like,
Letterman?
shortly after, yeah, and like shortly after the interview
Zero's the
started,
devil, Lucas kills.
Oh, did I have six kills?
Yeah. Alright, so go ahead.
But like,
Remember who it was?
she
that
was
did
like
it?
Madonna,
Oh, Madonna. Oh, yeah. I can see that.
and she was like, I presented them to you. Aren't you going to sniff them or something, or smell
Is that
them
what
or
she
something?
said?
Yeah, and he was like, what? He was caught off guard. He played it off somehow. He put them in the desk drawer or some shit.
I'll sniff them bitches later. Or not at all, you fucking weirdo.
Yeah, that's what he was.
Saving this for later.
What a fucking...
Yeah.
Was that recently or like a while ago?
No, that was. He retired a couple years ago or something, but this was like late 90s,
yeah.
early 2000s.
Oh yeah, Colbert took the shit over, right?
Oh, maybe so, maybe so. I like Letterman the best, I think, of the ones we grew up with, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'd have to agree with that statement.
Leno's also funny. I mean,
I like Colbert.
But-
He's good.
oh yeah, Stephen Colbert's pretty funny. I just mean like I mean, he hasn't been a talk show host for long, you know. But yeah, I didn't know he took over for Letterman though. I knew he had a show.
Yeah, his show is pretty good too.
Yeah, I think you're right.
The Colbert Report. Yeah.
Colbert Report.
Oh yeah, that was funny.
I'm a big fan of John Oliver's This Week Tonight. Big fan. Makes me laugh.
I'm sure. Oh, I have not seen that, but I saw him when he was like on the Daily
Yeah.
Show, and I thought he was funny.
Yeah, it's on HBO Sunday nights. It's pretty funny.
I need a shirt if you see it.
I pinged a blue shirt when I took it off.
Well, I
Oh,
did
damn.
it. But I'm dropping a white one for it.
Oh, that'll work.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't see it anymore, so that's why I was confused as to.
You don't see it?
No.
I see it.
I can see it. I can see it on the map, but I don't see it like
Ah.
when I look in that direction.
Yeah. I thought if it shut up for one person,
It
shut
used
up for
to.
everybody.
Again, maybe it still does, and it's just a glitch. I don't know, but I remember like seeing stuff that like was dibs and like being annoyed by it because like I couldn't see people. In fact, I remember Zero asking me not that long ago to undib something so he could see the enemies because we were in a fight.
I didn't even remember that. I'm sure it's. Oh, I got you. Like,
Yeah,
it's
it was
later,
like we were
whatever.
being shot from like that direction and couldn't see anybody because when you looked, all you saw was the dibs.
I dropped 6 syringes here too.
I've got 6 myself, so Joe, if you
You
want to
see
pick those
that
up.
Okay.
the vest is in the top here. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, damn! I just fucking missed dibs in that. Where's it at, Grim? In that building?
Yeah. Is there any heavy guns around? I still
No, I just dropped the P2020 for a Mozam. But that's all I found for my second gun.
Wait, you purposely picked
drop
up
these
those
images
anti?
for you.
Oh, there's a loot bitch. Oh, and it.
Oh no, no! Dirty bitch.
It's alright, it's got a red thing, so it's got a vault key. Oh, I don't got the room for it.
Let's go to the vault.
Oh, okay.
I got myself a vault.
Right. Yeah.
Here, I'm gonna drop this if anybody needs that. I don't know. I don't.
I don't have a
You
sniper right
see
now
where there's
myself.
a vault?
Yeah, where I'm marked there.
Right underneath the train yard.
Oh, in there? Oh, that's not far.
Let's go get it, boys.
Yeah, that's really real. It's still closed.
Oh, there's a scout. I just dropped that fucking thing. Yeah, I'm gonna take that over the Mos.
There's light ammo.
Yeah, I'm dropping a Mozam.
Dude, we just... You might want to just come to
Yeah.
the vault
Yeah.
and fuck that.
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I'm saying yeah, bro. I'm saying yeah.
There's a blue heavy mag in that bin.
I'm saying yeah, bro.
Yeah.
Oh, I might hear people. Yep. Shit. Whole squad. I'm burning somebody a little. Down somebody, down somebody. Shit, I can't run through the fire.
You should be able to. It's my fire. You should be able to.
Oh. Down another.
Oh, I thought that was a vest. Right there. There we go.
Suck it, kids. Suck it, suck it, suck it. Suck it.
Suck on them titties.
Oh, good.
Hell to the yes. Oh, I'll take that anvil.
Somebody's coming. Somebody's coming.
Booyah!
I hear footsteps.
Okay. I hit him about 50, 75.
Broke his shield.
Whole squad, whole squad. Get your
Alright.
name.
Go up. Fuck that.
Oh, God. Fucked.
I am repairing myself.
I got no nades.
I'm burning somebody.
Oh, he slid in on it. Got him down.
Fuck.
God damn it.
God damn you,
They're
ball.
getting them up. Oh, we're all down.
Your damn
Another squad's coming.
tempting. Ha ha. Hey, I'm staying to watch this. I want to die. Nice.
I couldn't even see myself. My view was from outside.
Well, the greed of the vault playing 3 squads
Yeah.
in a row.
I guess vault keys are
Hey, we made top
Oh,
10.
damn.
Activated. At least I don't have to use Wraith anymore.
good. Now I can get my Wraith gameplays on.
We might have made top 10 because whichever one of us had a gold knockdown didn't quit the game or
Yeah.
back out. You know, we didn't all
But
back
yeah, we
out.
didn't die immediately.
That was badass though. We killed a squad, killed another fucking squad almost, but just got hurt and
Yeah.
then they got killed. Man, I've never seen so. Dude, you ought to clip that shit, Joe. 3 squads
That
fall
was
victim
nuts.
to one vault.
No, I mean,
Yes, sir. So I gotta play 1 game as Wraith for my last daily. I need.
Oh, what's my shits?
I need 600 more damage with a wingman. 5 items looted from my lifeline care package. 7 more knocks with a sniper rifle. I need 4 knocks in a drill site. I'm not even sure where the drill site is.
I don't. A drill?
Yeah, apparently there's a drill site.
Oh, you mean at the drill
Yeah.
site? It's
Yeah.
a location. I thought you meant like a gun site, and I was like, what the fuck is the drill site?
It's the site with the drill on it. Avi.
Fucking DeWalt.
Yeah.
Alright.
Are you gold now, Grim?
I don't think so.
I got
Those last 2
ways
matches should
away.
have got you points.
22 points in the last one.
Check.
I think you needed 40 something.
I think I got 20.
in the one.
Yeah, I needed 47 at some point. I think I got
But he's
maybe
silver, so
10
he makes
and then
more
20.
points. Oh, okay.
20. So.
Yeah, so it costs less points for you to get into a game then. So.
But once I hit gold, it doesn't matter. 'Cause I can stay at gold
Yeah, man.
forever.
That's right. That's a possibility. Shit, I'd love to get past gold, but it's kind of tough.
Did you ever get past gold 4?
I was within a hair of gold 3, and like then I just had so many losses it put me back down to the baseline or
Alright,
whatever.
so here's the drill site. I had to do
I'm
something at the drill site. Get kills or knockdowns.
Let's do it. Let's drill some shit.
But maybe
Oh,
with this
crap,
new
okay.
point system, it'll be a little better since you can get assist points now and all that.
Yeah,
shit.
that's so nice. So
Yeah.
nice.
It should be that way. It's fucking dumb not to count assists and stuff like that. It ought to count downs as a point or something.
I'm gonna hit this little building right here.
Alright. I'm on this and
Yeah, I mean, with you get 10 points for a kill or assist, like getting 1 point for a down wouldn't be unreasonable.
exactly.
That was a white sniper stat.
I mean, you've defeated someone when you down them, and they're fucking. If it weren't for their teammates, they'd be a dead motherfucker if they don't have a gold
I
shield.
missed. God damn it! Twice. I'm trying to shoot a loot thing. No,
Are
I'm trying to
people
shoot a
shooting
loot
us?
thing, and I missed until it flew away. God damn it!
Purple bow.
Oh, I'll might take that.
Backpack here. Level 1.
If anybody sees a heavy gun they don't want, hang it.
Hemlock.
Alternator here.
Oh, thanks. I don't see it. Oh, next to the bolt.
Don't see it? I just pinged it.
It's-
It's in the top floor
not-
of that building.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the one with the bolt.
There's some stuff popping off the train yard.
And there's a blue energy thing. Alright. You wanna get in?
I'm
some-
just letting
Some
y'all
trouble?
know that stuff is happening.
I want
Trouble?
some
You want trouble? Okay, we can do some trouble.
Yeah.
Me like it, trouble. Ooh, wait a minute. We got a blue vest over here. Who wants a blue vest? Blue vest for all. Everybody got a blue vest, blue vest, blue vest.
Whatever. Pick it up. Pick it up, Graham.
Yeah, I hear the bullets.
I'm-
You can fly over there. Oh, what the fuck? Am I running circles?
I need to get this hemlock
99?
real quick.
Yeah, I'll pick that shit up, bruh. How do we get over there? There it is. Alright, you ready to murk some food?
Oh, there's another loot bitch.
Yeah, I'm behind.
Another loot
though.
bitch. I'm gonna shoot this down. Doesn't have a vault. It doesn't look like it, but it's gold.
Ooh, gold.
What do you got? What do you got? Gold helmet. Yeah, boy.
Shotgun bolt here. Level 3.
Yep.
You ready?
Yep.
Oh, there's another one that does have a vault key.
How's that? Did you throw something?
Let's go this way.
Somebody, no, I thought somebody shot it. I'm gonna run into this bitch. Bam! Just missed it. Oh, dude, I brushed it. Wait, where the fuck did you guys go? I thought you marked.
I
it.
did, yeah. I
Behind-
marked it just to, I don't know, show yous.
Hey, vault
Okay.
key. Field agreed.
Somebody's
oh, it's
here.
right next to us.
I'm hearing somebody.
Oh shit! Oh
All right.
shit! Let's run to the vault.
Yeah, we should go to the vault and get all looted up.
Never mind.
Parts.
Oh yeah, they just zipped up.
I'm the one that's far away.
They just zipped up to that cart above me.
Oh hell!
I'm sneaky following.
All right, so there's a laser. Yeah, he's lasering me.
Oh,
I gotta go. I gotta go. He's fucking me up.
Got one.
Recharging my shields. Running inside.
Got two.
hell yeah, Grim. I'm coming upstairs. Oh, that kid just zipped across, Grim. He's zipping to there. Oh, he jumped. He dropped. Dropped
they're
next to
getting
you.
me from up top.
No, he dropped next to you. He
Last
dropped
guy's
next to you.
here.
This is a different squad. I think.
Yeah, it's another squad.
I just broke a kid's shield down there.
Yeah.
Broke someone's shield there.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
we
fucking
should have went to the vault. Fuck.
Heard that the
kill our
Gibraltar
ultimate
map.
dead.
Gibraltar's almost fucking dead. Yeah.
I gotta go heal up.
Yeah. One is. I hear somebody right coming to you, Joe. I think. No, he's up here. I think there are two alive, Joe.
I'm down.
Yep.
Oh, good try. Shit was crazy. We rarely lose to a single squad, though, so that's kind of nice. I mean, even in ranked, we rarely lose
Well, that
to
was
a single
yeah,
squad.
I was definitely the second squad. I might have bumped up the gold with that. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
Who likes it? Exactly, keeping track. +8. I'm so short.
Ooh, I went minus.
Yeah,
24.
minus
21
22.
points still. Damn. 21 points. I got.
Well, that's half of
28.
what you did need, but oh, good deal. You have how many
So I
kills
need-
do you have?
2.
Noise.
Yeah, I killed the first two and only lost like 25 health, but then the third dude started shooting me from up above somewhere, and I was just like teetering on dead the rest of the time.
Yeah,
Tried
you
to
did
help
good
out.
though. Before you went down,
Yeah.
I was shooting really damn good at a couple of those guys, but it wasn't enough. I just hurt the Gibraltar bad. And
Oh, right.
I don't
So
know
I
if I
need
even
3
damaged
octane
another
kills.
one.
So I'm almost done that.
oh, nice.
You got 2. I just need 1 more kill then.
Ay, ay, ay.
Oy, oy, oy. Down, 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 down.
All right. All right.
Let's make a choice. Land here.
Heard that.
Is that
No.
the blue? No,
Yeah.
blue's behind it.
That's the drill site again.
That's the train. Oh, it's not okay.
What do you think is over here? Let's go this way.
Can't see anybody else landing here.
It sucks. I need knockdowns or kills or something here.
I might hear somebody. I'm not sure.
Mozambique on fleek.
My music turned really loud because I like this song. I probably won't be able to hear
Oh, I
anything.
do. Oh, that's you. That's Joe.
You hear
It's
somebody?
probably the next. No, that was Joe. It's probably the next side over or something.
Body shield here. Level 1.
Here, a loot. Loot, bitch. Where the fuck is it? There it is. What? No, you don't.
Nice.
No, you
Good
don't.
save.
Oh shit. I think somebody over there will get that, but it's blue anyway. So.
Turbo charger.
Barrel stabilizer here. Level 2.
The white vest over here at 2-0.
I got a blue
Bottom
one
of
just
this
now.
building.
Thank you.
Got one.
Just picked it up. Backpack next to the devotion allotment.
Alrighty.
Another longbow.
Friends, there is an extended energy magazine here. Level 2.
Maybe I'm wrong with that devotion.
Got a
You know, I
turbocharger.
bet every game we could just run to a vault as soon as we got our first loot and just shit on the. I mean, get them to come to us every time. I mean, maybe not.
Yeah,
every
I'm pretty
time,
sure that some of them
pretty
are
often.
doing that. I mean, they're not there because they have a vault key. They're there because they want to kill somebody who has a vault key and take it from them.
Yeah. And you know, I think we got the credentials to do it.
I mean, I think we might.
I mean, I don't mean I want to do that every match. I just, you know, sometime we might want to try.
I could use select file.
Yeah, if we're by a vault, we could stop by and say hi.
Right. Here's 100 light rounds.
Extended light back here. Level 1.
Light ammo here.
Oh, where's that? I missed that? Fuck.
Just what? Oh, that clip.
Yeah, I was in there. But I missed it.
Alright, where do we want to move to?
Get into the circle!
Yeah,
Sure.
All right, I'm right behind you. Oh no! Bounced off.
Was this not looted yet? Doesn't really look like it, does it?
No.
Can you send a zip line up to the cars? Yeah, right? Oh, wait,
yeah.
no, did you open these bins? Because these are open.
No, I didn't.
Maybe it was looted then, just not fully. So the bins might be looted.
I'm setting a zip up to this bin. They're not
Does it
complete.
look looted?
There's a double
Oh,
tap.
yeah, there's some shit laying around. Yeah, there's stuff right up here. Damn, I can't believe somebody might have just ran through and picked up little shit. There's a blue knockdown. Some more heavy.
Oh shit.
Sniper stock here. Level 2. Knockdown shield here. Shield battery here.
Oh, whoops. No, I'm trying to pick that up. Whoopsie. That's what I meant to. Wait, I already pinged it. I thought it was in that. Yeah, the knockdown shield. I did ping that, right?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
Mechanic. Joe, you don't have any knockdown
No.
shield. Where are these bullets coming from?
Here's
I'm
a
hearing
flat one.
shots. Well, there's a blue one right here. And there was
Oh.
a blue one over.
Yeah, I got the
think
other blue
there.
one.
Oh, you got
Yeah, I
that?
got it.
Well, there's one where I am.
Alright.
There's a 99 in Joe's
Yeah, I'm
building.
grabbing that.
Alternator here.
Alright.
Yeah, now I hear the fire.
I think it's through the tunnel. You want to go through there?
Okay.
Do we have a key? No.
Nope.
No.
There's somebody right here.
Okay.
Got him.
Oh no.
Oh, that grenade's gonna hurt.
Shit. Grenades everywhere.
Need to recharge my shields.
Got him.
Damn. Good job, Grim. Hell fire.
Look. Yeah, look for a what's it called in one of them.
Harvest. I need a blood harvest.
You want that stabilizer?
Nah,
there?
I'm good.
Nah, I'm good. What was it? What color? I need a
What,
select
barrel
fire. Is what
stabilizer?
I need.
There's some
There's a bunch
shooting
of
right
light
out
on
here.
too. I need to heal
Yeah,
up
right.
before I go.
Okay,
do
yeah.
more Stuff.
Yeah, me too. All of us do. Let's heal before we hop in on these fools.
Catching myself up.
Damn, I hear it, but I don't see it. I think it's right over there. Oh, Joe. Hey,
Yeah,
Joe's running the
definitely
different.
sounds that way.
Joe's
I'm
running
going
around
with a
this
crazy
way.
flank maneuvers.
Alright.
I see a Gibraltar.
Okay,
Flank
okay.
them bitches.
I just.
Now,
Gibraltar.
Yeah. Look at
Yeah.
Gibraltar. I like it. Somebody bounced over there. You see that fool?
I didn't. I'm behind the hill.
They're right in front of you.
Oh, fuck.
Broke dude's shield.
Birdman's almost dead.
Oh yeah, hey, they sniping like a motherfucker. Oh shit, they're behind us. Fuck.
God damn. Oh, it's two
God
squads.
damn, man, every fucking
I
time.
fucked up though. I walked right out in the open like a dummy. Hey, top 10 though.
I'll take the
anyways.
points, but
Damn, can't get no kills up in here.
Gold yet? Come on, gold. What do I need? 20 something? 22. Was that enough? Yeah. Woo, gold.
Hell
level
yeah.
4. Hell yeah. Oh, that was. Oh, I had 1 point to spare. So I needed 21.
Huh.
I got 22.
Noise.
so I guess
I think we were gold last season, right? All three of us?
I don't know. I thought so, but
I think I just barely. I think me and you, Joe, just barely made a goal. I think zero was
Yeah.
gold before we were last.
yeah, he was playing with other
Yeah.
fellas before he met us, and they were like
Oh, I was playing with cool
diamond
fellas.
rank or something. I forget.
They're good. Yeah, they were diamond, or one of them was diamond.
Oh, so we're not good? Zero? Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, no.
Is that y'all?
Oh no, these
Man.
guys were good.
The truth
you
comes
see.
out, man. Oh, they were good. Not just, good, like us.
Shit, those fucking diamond games are a bitch. Like,
I bet. I'll be right back. I got a bet.
The ring isn't really complex, but it can be a little complicated. Wait, what I just
those guys that are like diamond and I guess upper level platinum, they're so disciplined. Like I don't think if they have bad knots, they're probably better than me on a good knot. You know, it's like, well, I don't know if it's that good, but they're real good.
Introducing your champion. Come get some. Move it or die.
This is only the beginning. We all wear costumes to hide who we are.
So, hopefully we can live up to your
I don't know, man.
live up to your expectations there.
Take a guess where we're going.
Hopefully we'll be as good as your other friends.
Yeah.
Oh, I know
Land
they're
the
better
shit
than
I
me.
pinged.
They got attitude.
Somebody moment to drop
They got
early
too
to
much
hit one of
sass.
the close boxes. Okay.
I'm gonna try to hit this one.
Alright. Oh my god, I missed it!
You made me drop early just so you could miss it, ma'am.
Well, what are the odds that I'm gonna miss it?
Shit.
I hear people
Okay,
behind me.
Joe,
take it, take it. I already got a
up.
shirt.
No, get it. They're coming. Go ahead, dude. You were here first. No. He just got. Oh goddamn! I should have got.
I got
I'm
one
out of ammo.
fool.
Oh
I need
my
to
God.
kill you. Give me your
Dude.
shit, bro. I need
Dude.
your shit, man.
Dude, you need to kill this
And a
fucker.
select fire? Nice. Alright, what are they in the
No, they
skybox?
jumped down.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
I hear somebody.
I was chasing him around.
I see him.
Thank you, sir.
I have no ammo.
What do you need? Heavy,
you
light?
Pussy. Let's
Light.
get him.
Here. There's my last 12 bullets.
Alright.
Enemy killed.
do
I
it.
took care of it, don't worry.
Nice job, Grim.
There's devotion there. I have 0
I hear somebody else.
light ammo. All I have is a wingman besides this, so pray
Yeah, I
for me.
have 0 light ammo, and all I
Here's
have
a
is
purple
light
box that's
guns.
just got energy weapons. Here.
Alright, I just
Oh, I have some stuff. I have energy ammo, a 6x optic.
Here's your lock
And
back.
then-
Oh no, this devotion has 0 ammo.
Yeah, I have a gun with only 2
it's
bullets
all
in it. I like
it's
that.
okay.
And that's my real gun.
Did you pick up that energy
No,
weapon?
there's energy weapon here. I'm gonna grab though.
Oh well here's your I'll give you your lot back.
No, you're good. Keep it.
Oh, what the fuck happened to it? Oh,
Oh,
it's
wait,
in my,
yo, I have a Phoenix
in my
kit.
gun.
Where's the Phoenix kit?
I could use some
Joe
heals.
does.
yeah.
How is there no bullets next to the 301 in the box? Oh wait, there was. I have. Okay. Here.
Thank
That's the
you.
only health heals I got, so just use that shit. Ooh, yes. Where was that? Right here.
Eyes are open now.
Might be hearing footsteps. Not sure.
So while Joe and I
I
were
know
arguing over
sad
who should take the
son.
purple shield, this fuckhead zips in our car and picks it up after we pound on him.
Oh yeah.
But you killed him.
Yeah, that's probably that shield. Oh, that was
Yeah.
a lot. Okay. Is there a key
No.
in it?
On the here. Level 2.
No key in it.
Ooh, I see light ammo.
Somebody's being respawned right here.
Yeah.
Oh, right
okay.
there? Let's go, bro.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Who do they think they are, man?
Hell to the is.
It's like Duck Hunt.
Enemy down.
Up here.
Boom.
They jump down to you.
Face.
Right man, jump down to you.
Yep.
See him? Yeah.
Oh, I guess he just came back too.
And you killed the guy
Yeah.
who jumped down, right?
He just came down too. All he had was a
Is there a
so
third
they
guy?
brought two back, because two of them
Yeah.
were naked. Okay, so where's the guy that brought him back?
The third man. I bet he's stealthing somewhere. Like a bitch. He ought to
Like
come
a
suicide.
There's
I
shit
don't
going
see
down in
him.
the tunnel. You wanna go check
Sure.
that
Oh,
out?
there's a purple box here.
I'm a little behind
The
you. I'm
shotgun bolt? I'll take it. That's all that was in there was a purple shotgun bolt. But it makes my peacekeeper so much better.
Alright. Oh yeah.
You are solo, Grim.
Alright, so somebody opened the vault. There's purple shit down in the ground.
I'm just trying to get new candy out of my bag.
You're way ahead of us,
I
Grim.
need my candy. Wait a minute.
Coming in the tunnel right
There's
I
nothing
missed-
cool at all left in it. Don't even waste time going in the vault. Wait, there's a double tap, turbocharger, purple.
I mean, that all
and
Take
then
that
the two things
turbocharge.
outside.
that all sounds. Are you using an energy weapon also?
Someone's shielding up, right around here.
I'm not. Oh, okay. I'm with you.
Got one. Got two.
There's a gas
One
trap.
left.
They traps.
Got three.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Somebody's
I was
grenading,
in
somebody's
the rifle,
grenading.
But I didn't take the double tap. More dudes. More dudes. No grenades. Fuck. Hurt him
Alright, I'm
bad.
with you. Oh, he just did his ultimate, motherfucker.
Oh,
busting these
crap,
kids
girl.
up.
I'll throw some fire.
I knocked one. I'm
I
down,
don't know
but I
where they
knocked
are,
one.
but I can't run through the gas.
You need to throw nades at them if you got them, because they're going to get their dude up. Good nade, good nade.
We got this.
Alright, let me see if there's more grenades. I'll send the decoy over there.
Oh, I'm out of
Come
ammo
on,
pretty
doubles,
much.
doubles. What do you need? What do you need?
They laid traps.
I just got some.
Alright. Oh, nope, I have no troubles left. Alright,
My
so now we can
accuracy's
go out
so-
there.
Oh, no, no, no. Goddamn gas. Damn, I got no meds.
My accuracy
From
fucking
the left,
sucks.
From the left. From that rock.
I'm almost dead. I got a Phoenix kit up. If you can just
From the rock.
hold out for a
Oh,
minute.
goddamn, a third guy.
Fuck, man.
Oh, no.
He's on my ball.
Fuck.
How many people are
Yeah.
left? Please don't.
He's looting me one.
Nah, there was
one-
two by me. There's three.
He's off my. Oh, I thought.
Yeah, no.
Got one.
Yeah, yeah. Oh no. Oh, what? What?
Man.
How did you got that dude down? How were they? Oh my god.
There was two
Oh,
in the boxes in the
okay.
beginning. Yeah.
I downed a guy and they got him up. Okay. But I still thought there was only two up.
Yeah, if I'd have trouble,
Because then y'all went in there and I thought you got.
start off, but I was
Yeah.
all fresh out.
Yeah, one of you landed a Bernie stick though that I thought would have fucking got the guy that got down. He must have like scooted out of the way fucking quick.
Motherfuckers.
Slippery motherfucker.
So I just got a 100 premium credits, and I'm finally 20 points above being flush at gold 4. So, yay for me.
Noise.
20 points
Yeah.
above? Wait.
20,
start
yeah,
at?
2800.
100?
So
Yeah.
I'm at 2820.
I have 20. I have 2857.
Man.
So am I in the lead now with all three of us with points for gold?
Yep. I got
Putting in a little bit of
I'm
work
in last
today.
place.
I'm having some lucky games.
We're in this together. Remember that.
Good shit. If that squad hadn't had grenades, I think we would have had their ass.
Yeah. Or if I had a couple grenades in the end,
Yeah.
I probably could have taken out those first two because they're probably injured.
Oh yeah,
And
they
then-
were getting burnt.
And then it would have been at least one-on-one against that last guy.
Yeah.
Maybe I
Yeah.
could have done it. I don't know.
I don't see how that last guy. Oh, he had his buddy shooting you too.
Well, I downed the first dude, shot at the other dude, sent in a decoy, went to run around to shoot the dude I tricked with the decoy, but then some other guy was shooting me. That cost me. And that's who I started aiming at, but then the dude that I faked out with the decoy, that's who shot me. Like the second dude I saw, the Wraith or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, I just got Swiss cheese.
The fucking surprise party member that popped up on us there.
Yeah.
That was the way to do it, though. You're the master of letting them look in a box and taking your aim.
Yeah, like yeah. And the trick is you just walk slow, and if you walk slow, they can't hear you. So you can
You ain't
do
even got to
whatever you
crouch.
want.
Just walk slow.
Yeah, I just walk slow. Crouching is like almost
Okay.
completely silent, but you know it takes
You
forever.
don't need
So I
it
just
really.
walk
It's
slow,
just
and they're listening for like running steps. If they hear walking steps, they probably think you're far away, so they're not even worried. Seems to work pretty often.
Somebody's on me.
I mean, I
Birdman's
like
about to
do it.
kill me. I'm dead.
Yeah, I got no
Yeah,
gun
I'm
on
coming.
me. Oh, he's punching me.
What floor are you on?
He's got
This
a
floor?
shotty.
Ah, shit.
I'm outside.
I hit him
Stuck
with the
him with that
arc
arc
star.
star.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't get hurt yet. Damn.
Nice. Yeah, claim your kills.
I only have 10 bullets. I can't do it 10 bullets.
Oh, I didn't know Joe was down. Over there. Oh, no.
Trying to grab those bullets over there.
Yeah,
Damn
just shot the fucking box, man. Damn.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah, man, I hate getting put out in the very beginning like that. I couldn't find a gun. I chucked a nade at my feet.
Yeah?
Didn't do shit.
Whatever you gotta
Did
do.
14 damage. Did less damage than punching him. Did half a punch with a grenade.
Damn. I feel like I might have had the last dude 5 bullets.
Oh,
But
I think
one
so.
started
Yeah.
with
I mean,
like 1 box or 2 maybe, whatever comes in that.
yeah, I'm sure if you'd had bullets, I mean, you had 2 of them now.
That was just luck.
That's
I nailed him with
that
the
he
arc
came
star.
in, though.
I probably didn't even have to shoot that dude. He probably would have
Yeah, I
got
saw
down
him
just by
get
the arc
stuck.
star. So it does 75 damage if you hit him with the arc star, and then it blows up and does more. So I should have saved
Yeah,
those bullets,
Man,
and then maybe.
after I got put out, when the screen turns black and white, when it's about to take your taking yourself away, I saw your arc star hit him, and it was
Oh, you
like
saw
glowing
it?
in white. Yeah.
I just love that. I don't care what happens in the game. If I hit somebody with an arc star, I feel like that was a great game.
Yeah, no doubt. Ninja style.
That's the second hit I got today. Right? Didn't I do it earlier? I think, right?
Oh, I don't know.
Did that when we first started?
Don't remember.
Yeah. Remember? That's what it was. It was we were going to the what's the shit with the key?
Yep.
Vault. And then I had my arc star out, and some chick was just standing out front of Wraith. So I was going to hit her with it, and then she ran in. And I was like, oh, I think I hit her, but then she ran in. And then she ran out and started shooting at us, and I still hit her with it. That's when you threw all those grenades, and you downed somebody with one, and then like got the kill with like the one that you threw immediately.
Yeah.
after that.
Wait. You saw him through an arc star just as she ran in, and then she ran out, and the arc star still stuck her?
No, I saw her standing by the door, like not even looking this way. So I'm like, yo, I'm gonna throw an arc star on her. And then she ran in, and I was like thinking, oh, maybe she doesn't know we're here, she just ran in. But then she like ran out shooting. And then when she ran out shooting, that's when I threw it, and I happened to hit her with it.
That's dope.
That one, I was just trying to honestly land it by her feet or something. But, because after she ran in, I was like, alright, let me stop her as she runs out.
Fight tomorrow too, but you'll be dead.
Where's hell? Over there.
I wish all of you could fight tomorrow
I
too.
think I've got a hit with an arc star, but
What do I know?
I'm pretty sure I have, but it's rare, man.
Yeah,
me.
one time in the old map, you know, artillery, you with the big A buildings and the wall and the zip line and shit. I hit somebody, like,
Yeah.
it was super lucky, from super far away with an arc star, like, as soon as you landed, that's all I had. And then they sent me a message calling me a bot, and I thought that was hilarious, that they thought, like, I was a bot because of the move I pulled. Oh, there's somebody in here. All I
Yep.
have is an
Oh,
arc
there's
star.
people everywhere.
Oh, yeah, I got no
Oh
gun.
man, I'm fucked.
Oh, this is pure Garbo.
I'm dead.
Oh my god, I can't fucking get out of here.
Yeah, this is so delayed, dude.
We got to watch each other's back.
On my screen, I threw a fire grenade that it couldn't pass, but then I get downed and the fire grenade never got thrown. Then I go outside, close the doors, and then I get shot with the doors closed. Like, there's a fucking big ass delay.
Somebody coming.
Dude's, yeah.
Do you have any light ammo you could spare?
Dude, there's a spiral
Could you drop me like a box? Just a box of light ammo would be good. And then get a fresh body shield. Grab that fresh body shield. Alright, so I got a Peacekeeper and a fucking P2020.
Flatline.
Yeah, I'm gonna drop this fucking P2020 for that.
Yeah, flatline tears shit up, bro.
Right here, I can give you that light
Yeah.
ammo back.
No, you can have it. Just
Oh,
the
dude,
healing
healing
body, if you
shit
don't mind.
for zero.
There you go.
Robot shit.
Grab all that shit.
Thank you.
No
I've got
problem.
enough life.
I
now,
heard
go ahead.
somebody, though. Did you guys hear that? I think somebody's zipping to somewhere. I don't know where.
Right here, there's a
Bottom. They came.
hit a spawn. It's right here actually. There's a respawn.
Okay.
We can
okay.
get him like right here.
Oh, I didn't know Grim went. Dude, I thought Grim was like running around doing tactical shit.
Yeah, I'm tactically chilling in a box.
Damn it.
Almost. I don't like this thing. I was fighting somebody in this before.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
kept closing and opening. I'm like, what the fuck?
I'm gonna
Alright,
drop
where
an
is their
alternator
guns? Do
for
you guys know where there's any guns?
I'm gonna drop an alternator.
And there's a bag here. And then you got a flat line, a Peacekeeper.
Somebody
We
just
got
threw a nade.
grenaded. We're getting
Somebody's
grenaded.
throwing
We're getting
nades.
grenaded. Oh, they're right there. Shit. Son of a.
Where they at?
Oh shit, they're on our left too. They're on our left.
And we're getting grenaded from the other side.
Fuck! God.
God, I broke
Damn
one of
it,
their
man.
shields.
Yeah.
I bet
I didn't
he
think there's
had
anybody
better than
close.
blue shields. I mean, I
Yeah.
bet he had at least blue shields.
Thinking back, we
Oh, maybe
probably
not.
should
I only
have
did
done
111.
some tactical zipline moves or some shit. But I didn't think anybody was there. Apparently, we were surrounded by everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I looked around before I brought you back a little bit, you know, but... Or actually, I looked around after I hit
I'm gonna
the
ready
thing.
up. I'll be right
I
back.
didn't see anybody till...
Oh yeah. Who's hype? Who's ready to kill some motherfuckers? Yes, yo.
Alright. I peed. I'm back. I'm a new man. I'm ready to fuck these motherfuckers up with the new hands.
Yeah. Joe's
that's
motherfucking
what-
hype.
that's what I'm
He's
talking about.
fucking hype.
I saw this shit on a Facebook group I'm in that shows fucking Patrick Stewart. It says this this is white people's version of Morgan Freeman.
That is very true. Although, I don't know. Morgan Freeman is kind of white people's version of Morgan Freeman also. Morgan Freeman is universal.
He's the white
He
people's
is.
version
Yeah.
of a black guy.
Yeah, that... No.
True story.
This is a Star Trek themed meme group, so
That's a pretty...
that's why they chose Patrick Stewart. I just joined it because it's called Mr. Spock's Dank Meme Stash, and I thought it sounded kind of funny.
Oh shit!
All right.
Yo, he's upgrading this
Been
game
crippling
real
us.
quick. We're gonna kill him. We're gonna kill him.
At least I can see that they're dirty.
There we go,
But-
Jump Master.
Sharp
Oh, do you want to go to
but
hell?
blurry.
Sure.
Whatever
Whatever you want to do.
Oh, crap. I have a respiratory system.
While you're holding your breath?
Where do you want to land? Close building, far left.
I
right.
guess I'll
Where do you
live
wanna go?
close. Is that your
Yeah, there's
Alright.
decoys.
Then I'm gonna, yeah. So I'm gonna go to the left wing, like back here, that building.
Okay, I'll go
Stay
right.
close in this shit.
Alright, I got a longbow. I think somebody's here.
Yep. Take the guns so they can have nuns.
We get guns, they get nuns.
So, longbow and a P2020. Not my finest out.
Back door.
I got
Oh,
triple
shit.
take peacekeeper.
Okay, come.
I heard him. I got no heals.
Here, I got heels.
Off
Come
the
here.
Gas trap. Oh, thank you.
Alright, I'm gonna, yeah. They might be on the roof. I have a triple take, so I'm gonna try to be a sniper man.
Okay, I got a longbow, so I'm gonna
I think
try
they
to
ran away.
longbow
I'm
the
not seeing
shit out of them.
I heard them, but they might have heals, so. I only hurt one of them. I only hurt the bang.
He only banged a bang, and I'm
them. Unless they're just like creepy.
gonna fuck
Yeah.
this bang up with this longbow.
Yeah, what the fuck? Where'd they go? Oh, no, that's
The
fire.
bin's in the middle are unopened. They might have just ran. They might have
All right, let's just.
There's an unopened bin over there.
Oh, right there. No, wait, no, I'm sorry. That's a. No,
Okay.
nope. It was a railing. It was a railing.
No, that's a building. I'm
That's
sorry,
no,
a building.
that's
not
definitely a railing.
I figured it out. That is a building. Okay.
It was definitely a railing. These bins are open.
Oh, the vest here is 0. Oh, I
sweet.
think I might be hearing footsteps.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
There's
where we
a
were.
charge rifle guy.
Stop shooting me, bro.
Pop out, bro. Oh, did that hurt?
I'm shielding up and healing up. I'm peeling up, the reeling up.
And one over here.
No, that's a decoy. That's a decoy. He crawled back in.
No, I hit him for 26. He's with it.
Alright.
Oh, that's a different
I'm
dude. That's a
shielding up,
different. That's a.
Popping out my shit.
Got one down.
Alright, the other guy's inside. Alright, I'm gonna go in from
Yeah,
the other
gas
side.
trap. Okay.
Fuck your
Oh,
gas,
dude on the roof
bitch.
too. Dude on the roof.
Alright, I'm inside. Alright, I'm gonna go on the roof. I'm gonna go on the roof.
Fucking god damn it, man.
Is this
Yeah.
the roof guy?
Yep. Yep.
Hey, roof
Yeah,
guy!
yeah.
Oh my god! Damn it! Hit the first shot pretty good. Second two, not so much.
What did he have? A turbocharger or something?
Charge rifle's what killed me.
Some fucking energy gun.
I think he had an energy. He probably had a turbocharger. He thought you were stepping to Urkel, but you were stepping to Stefan.
Yeah, it was definitely Stefan Urkel.
I don't know, man. It's just
I
not.
remember that.
Yeah.
It's just not working.
the cool juice he would drink or some shit like that, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
something. I forgot how he did it, but yeah, there was some kind of
He
fucking.
would drink like I forget what we call it. I think it might be called the cool juice. He drink like test tube of like blue stuff. So then Stefan and Laura be like, oh, let's bang, Stefan. Now I
Yeah.
really bang you.
Yeah. Oh, if you just hadn't been wearing those fucking windshield glasses. Hey, I found out something about Family Matters. I just read this on the internet. I mean, I watched it, but I didn't watch it like every week, you know. But like the younger daughter, like in one of the later seasons, she just walks upstairs in one episode, and then you never see her again in the whole series. Like, I guess, you know, she
Oh,
quit or
really?
got fired.
She
or
died in the
something, yeah.
room and they just like covered it
the
up.
Disappeared and
Yeah.
nobody, yeah.
Plastic
Nobody
wrap
cares.
over their door.
This is gonna be a good fight.
Dude, I read this.
We'll just
fucked
lock
up
that door. Don't go in there.
True crime story about a woman in Chicago with 4 kids, and like 2 of the kids went missing, and like every time somebody asked about them, she just makes some excuse, and like she got evicted or something, and they went in her apartment, and she had killed 2 of her kids and kept them in a fucking deep freezer, dude. Like, and when she
Damn.
got caught, she said that she had found out that both the kids had like raped her younger kid, and she like tortured them and killed them and stuck them in the deep freeze, like one by one, like the 2 that she claimed had
Damn.
done it. Yeah, it was fun. It was kind of gross.
That's some sick shit.
I mean, what do you do though?
Shit.
Everybody says like, oh, yo, if anything happened to my daughter,
Yeah.
I'd fucking kill that motherfucker. What if it's your
Yeah.
son that did it? I mean, what do you do?
Yeah, I could, if she was telling the truth, I could understand her just killing them. I could even kind of understand her putting them through some pain first, but like, it was sick, dude. Like, the whole thing will just leave you like shaking your head, and like, you know, you kind of think that if she did this, you know, what if she was the one that turned them into what they were, you know?
Right, probably
But-
was.
But you never know, is it? But it,
It's all
yeah,
about
hard to say,
education.
you know?
It's what
But yeah,
it's
I
what
mean,
they learned.
If I had a kid, yeah, if I had, yeah, I'd kill some motherfucker if they raped my kid.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah. The havoc here.
I got a 45 for
A sniper
now.
thing, triple take.
Oh well, I guess no.
Energy ammo. Shit.
I'm not taking that havoc if you want it.
No, it's not been working out for me.
I can drop it off the out of the bin for you if you want it.
Yeah, you know what? Fuck it. I'll do it. I'll
All right, hold up.
Fuck it. I'm going for 10.
And there's a shield there.
Is that
Yeah,
us
it's
zipping?
0.
That's me.
Playing around with the zips.
I could use that.
Yeah, I needed that bag like there was no tomorrow. Thank you, sir.
Let me know if you
Havoc
see a
Ross down there.
45, 99, and 301. You still don't have a vest? I feel like there was.
Are you throwing ammo at me too?
There's one over here.
I'm
You
still up
don't
in
have it,
this
Joe.
shit. I was throwing all that out for you.
You're
I
the
don't need
man there, 0.
Well, ping one of the vests that are dibs.
any Dibbed.
Dib it.
Loot bot.
I dib it.
Oh, missed it. There's a blue loot bot out there.
Oh, sweet. Time to go whiz on.
I shot that piece of shit when it was blue.
There's a white vest somewhere here. I don't remember.
Yeah, I pinged it.
Did you get a? It was
I mean,
blue,
I
so did you
dipped
get a key?
Ooh yeah, blue magazine.
No.
Did the dip.
I didn't know you'd get a vault key out of a blue
You
one.
can get them out of any one of them. All of them, if they got a red little dot on it, you could get a little thing on them.
Ready for vault time.
So you got a walkie out of it? Let's go! Let's go, let's go, let's go.
No, No, I didn't.
I don't
Oh.
have one.
No.
Did you? You didn't?
No.
Oh, I thought you said
I mean,
you
we
had
can go
one,
back
Zero,
and
no?
look. No, I might have
Was there
said
a red
I said
spot
there
on
wasn't
it?
anything in it. Oh, I don't know. I didn't see one. It wasn't obvious if there was.
Where did it land? Around here?
Yeah,
Yeah. Maybe there is
it
none.
landed like right here.
I need a hat.
Oh shit! Yeah, you just gonna leave that there and not say nothing?
I got a hat.
I accidentally dropped it.
No, 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 no!
You
Take
can
it, take
have
it.
What?
No,
no, you can
take
have
it.
What is
Take
this?
it.
Secret good stuff. Fine.
The 2x. Drop in a circle though.
Oh, auction I have a 2x. Oh, I love that.
No. Zero wants to hide it in a bush and not tell anybody.
If I see a higher power one though, you can have it, or I guess Joe's got first.
Yeah, he
First
doesn't.
claim
Yeah,
on
he
that
doesn't.
shit.
Want.
2x.
I want you guys to both fill out a form, and if you could get
There's a
that to
blue,
me by the end of the
blue
game.
knockdown shield. I don't have time for that shit, Zero. I don't do forms. That's why I didn't have a job for so long, because I don't fill out applications.
Yeah, paperwork truly does suck. I found another 2x.
Oh, hell yeah. I'll take that shit. Got my teams, bro.
Top 16.
Woo! That's my
Man,
dream
we're
right
killing
there.
it. We are fucking killing it.
I've always dreamed of being lasting past 4 squads. Oh, somebody's shooting some shit.
Oh shit.
I'm shooting some shit, bro.
Oh, cool.
What's that noise?
There's a prowler and some heavy ammo here.
Somebody's like flying in to kill us.
Did you get a vault key?
Oh, a prowler, yeah. I have a suck prowler. Oh,
And here's a prowler if it's closer. I don't.
Nah, bro. My prowler is cooler and better, bro.
I got the coolest prowler, man. My prowler can compare.
Oh wait, why do I have? What am I carrying that for?
That's
Yeah.
the
What
wall.
am I carrying that for?
Blue light mag, can use that shit.
Oh, I was just about to say if I can find a gun like a 301, I'll take it. Drop this Havoc for that 30 whiz on, and I'm gonna get this shit. Oh, actually, I had one in my inventory like a dummy. Alright, so I'm gonna.
Got dummy done.
So, dropping a bunch of energy here.
Oh no, I need that. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, that's the one I pinged like
Sorry.
long time
Oh,
ago.
okay.
And then audibly talked about it, too.
Oh, I got my special. I gotta call my
Oh,
special
some
in.
sort of care package.
I'm right behind you.
Might be find some
Oh
cool. people to
yeah, I
kill
love
over
me some
here.
Kraberness.
Yeah.
Yes.
Alright,
Yes. Like 5
Get us some real
people.
alright, I'm not quite
Three.
there yet.
3 people jumped off that shit.
Okay, we're stalking them.
Alright, then I'm just gonna be a stalker. There's a blue vest there.
Oh, we're getting
Yeah,
stalked.
they see me.
Alright, I'm grenading them bitches.
Oh, they down me. I hit one.
Oh well, oh shit.
On the rock.
Fuck, man. This is not going well.
got
Yeah, there's one
one.
right here.
It's all you, Grim.
They're getting them up.
Third one is on me, Grim.
Oh no, it's a new squad.
Oh, there's two. It's a different squad. It's a different squad.
Ah, ha, ha,
All the time getting
ha.
tree feed.
Squad. Oi!
Yeah, that was a bitch.
I'm gonna take a smoke break and maybe make some food too. But
All right.
will be busy.
I probably just got a couple more in me, but I can play a couple more here. I got some shit to do too.
Okay.
Alright. I'll be back short.
If you get back in time, I'll see you. If not, see you soon.
Alright, you got 0.
Peace. Oh yeah, no ranking.
No, Ranky. It's not going so well tonight.
Yeah, I'm thankful for the demotion
Yeah.
protection.
Definitely,
Tonight.
definitely.
But I've been up, on other nights, I was up pretty good there. I don't know how many points over 28, but pretty far. I mean, in the dozens.
I don't know who my secret sauce is.
Amateur hour's over. Time for the big leagues.
No legends working with
I
me.
think I got a top 3 as lifeline. Yeah, man, I hate it when you can't get somebody fucking legend to work with you, man. It's like,
It's like, am I asking
unreasonable.
too much? I don't think so.
oh, look at that dude's bloodhound, like a fucking conquistador costume, or I don't know, plague doctor conquistador.
Yeah, I actually saw one of these just in one of these games. They killed me. So maybe it's the same fella.
It's like one of those. Yeah. I want to say it's a old school deep sea diving helmet plague doctor conquistador.
I mean, that's probably the name of it.
Not trying to overanalyze it, but
I mean, it looks like it's got like a chicken top. I don't know.
yeah, it does have a fucking chicken top.
That's it. I'm gonna get all the bullets and all the persons. I'm focused.
Yeah, I need to be doing that myself. Not the wang mang, just the gun I need to be aiming good with.
Exactly what I need to turn this shit around.
Hell yeah.
2 prowlers is not what, or 2 is not what I want to be doing.
Personal energy weapon. Takes multiple hoppers. Got a hop up here.
Whoa! I thought you were in the same building with me, mechanic. That was the
Yeah.
other dude.
Yeah, I landed a little bit off because I figured.
Oh,
I can use that.
Should I need a bag too?
I gotta get that.
Okay, you do you.
Oh, I'm not too far away. I'm not.
Hold on, what are you gonna
fairly
get?
close.
What are you saying?
This
Okay.
heavy mag.
That's what I thought you were talking about. I'm coming to you guys. I'm hearing shots at like the construction buildings.
Okay.
Compromise.
So I'm coming to you fellas.
I'll throw you a zip line, but I'm not the robot.
It's all good. I got my sledding pants on.
Hell yeah.
Well, actually might switch. I'm gonna switch it up. I'm going wingman. I'm doing big things.
Yeah, go for it. Blue clip
Oh
there.
yeah, I just picked one out of this other box.
Oh, okay.
I am ready to. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna drop this havoc for this thing. I'm coming. I'm coming. Shit, I never picked up that vest that somebody pinned. Fucking running around topless.
Ooh,
Get him!
ooh.
Get him!
Got a headshot with that Wang Mang.
Oh, I didn't even see that fucking closer person. God damn it. What? She was just like dancing around his bullets. That was insane.
That was insane. That was some bullshit. Did your phone make some kind of like weird notification sound?
No, I don't think so.
Did you hear that fucking like 5 seconds ago, 10 seconds ago or something?
I don't think so.
Man, I hear what the fuck? That must have been coming through my headset. I don't know what else it could be. That's weird.
Did your phone make a weird notification sound?
No, I was about to like I was looking at it, but maybe maybe it was some kind of Facebook sound because I had Facebook open. We got a new Facebook shit.
The new Facebook weirdness. Maybe. I don't. Yeah, my phone definitely didn't do anything.
Yeah, I don't know. It's strange. I think it was from the game though. That was weird as shit. I don't know what the fuck that would be.
Alright. So I know I've said it, but I was just kidding before. I'm focused. I'm ready for this one. This is the
Hell
game I'm
yeah.
like gonna get them all.
I was trying to be on the last one. I made 2 focus shots, but the rest of them not so much.
Yeah, I'm sick of. I don't even know the last time I killed somebody. I know I had a game
I feel like
that
I
had
don't
like
get,
2 kills tonight, but I don't. That might have been it.
I want to get a wingman with like a 2x on it. I rarely get a 2x when I'm carrying the wingman. Because like, those 2 wingman shots I made were long range with a 1x, like the iron sight on it or whatever I think, and like that thing is just like a little short sniper rifle. I mean, if you got a 2x on it, that's got to improve
Yep.
it.
Yeah, I really like the 2x on any gun, but the wingman it's nice. Now I have all of my settings changed to be the exact same, so it doesn't matter what scope I use. The movement is the same. But I used to like the 2x because it would slow me down just enough because I had my sensitivity really high. So maybe that's my problem.
Oh yeah.
Now that everything moves the same, I don't know. Something is a problem. I don't know what it is.
I might need to adjust mine too after the field of view increase. Might need to knock it down a notch. I don't know. Maybe I just need to get used to the next level.
Yeah, could be.
Where's the enemy
Yeah,
in
I
that
heard
building?
them when I was outside. I just got a Mozan. Oh, I'm coming.
I heard him some. Heard down here. Well, I swapped with him. There's a kid. Two guys up
Yeah, I'm
there.
coming.
Their
Oh,
buddy-
shit.
Their buddy is behind that box.
Oh, I was trying to come They were not letting me come.
If you, oh, well, yeah. You got a nade to throw behind that box, you can prevent them. They probably got their dude up already. Noise.
You have a shield in here I can steal? Yeah. Alright. I'm running the wall.
Yeah, alright, your buddy's still up. Oh, what the fuck? Yeah, kick it down. Take him to Ground Town.
I missed. I did like 8 damage on like my second to last shot there. That was it. I missed every other fucking shot.
No. Oh, that sucks.
Oh no, I did 28
it
damage at
happens,
some
though,
point.
man. It
I'm
happens
pretty.
all the time.
I don't remember it hitting connecting with anybody. That's fucking. Oh my god, it just drives me nuts. I can't stand it.
I did an even 100 damage and downed the guy. He didn't have a shield apparently, but he was shooting at me too.
Man.
Hey, baby.
What's up, babe?
I'm gonna get in the shower and change this screen.
Okay.
How will we doing?
He's just laying on the chair.
This experiment will sort out the capable from the incompetent.
I don't even know. I'm done saying it. 'Cause clearly I haven't been focusing, so I'm not even gonna pretend like I'm gonna focus.
It's hard some knots, man. Even when you're
Yeah, I
trying.
mean, I don't know. I'm gonna turn the face cam off. Maybe it's just too much pressure for me. I'm gonna give it up. I'm gonna let Sauced Up Don choose.
Let's do this shit. Yeah, I was failing hard with R99 2 games ago in that construction site.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
fell off. Maybe it's good for me because somebody beat me
I went
to it.
right through like the outside.
Maybe I needed that to
window.
grow.
So I done fucked up.
Oh shit. Oh, chose medic again. Damn.
There's somebody on the roof shooting at me and shit.
Oh shh. Oh shit, son. You can't hit shit, rookie. The fuck off me.
I'm shielding up real quick and then I am back in this bitch. Where he at? Yo, lay off my boy.
Got one down. I got down.
God. Oh my god. Oh my
Come on,
god.
Sauce. Come on, Sauce. Come be the boss. Sauce, where the fuck are
I'm
you?
having a fucking aneurysm. That's insane.
Wow, Sauce is a fucking bitch. What? He did 319? Well, he pushed out at the end, I'll tell you what.
15 fucking damage. Oh my god.
Man, slap yourself.
For real, I don't know. Like, what the like, I don't know what I need to change to make this stop happening. I've changed my sensitivity. I've played every character there is. It's just, man, I don't know. Well, let's switch it up again.
Breathe easy. Watch your side and never quit. This is your champion.
It's the season opening. It's really fun to do stuff. Follow me. I'm the chosen.
Let's land here.
Oh shit, I didn't realize it was a jump master. Where? I can't find it. Oh, okay. Alright, that's a different landing shit. Okay.
Oh, I gotta quit picking medic. Fuck.
Alright.
Energy ammo. I see another working here. There was the first. There get the rest.
I'm like even getting tired. Just from like, it's almost hard to pay attention because I keep losing. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I know. I get that same way. It'll like wear on you. I definitely do that same shit.
Shot a cargo bot.
Let's move here.
Gotta hop up here. Turbocharger.
SMG here.
Gotta hop up here.
Double tap. He just marked.
Okay, yeah, I actually have one. Blue helmet in here with this, in the building with that. If you're into that weird thing.
Oh, sorry. What'd you say?
No,
Shot-
blue, there's a
shotgun?
blue helmet in that building with that.
Oh, okay. Oh, damn, the ping just went away,
Ping
motherfucker.
again.
Okay, I see the building.
Shotgun ammo here.
It's in the stairway.
The ring is close. 60 seconds left. That's something I can use.
You mean like?
No,
up
it was
the
right at the
stairs?
bottom of the stairs.
Oh, I see. I went. There's two sets of stairs in there. I didn't even notice that shit. I have before, but it didn't occur to me.
Okay, there's a caustic right around here somewhere. He just threw traps in my building.
Okay, I hear him. Yeah, yeah, I'm a dumbass. Oh, he's over here.
Oh shit. Coming, I'm coming, I'm coming.
I broke his shields. He down.
Nice.
He out.
Nice.
He gave me a purple body
He's the
shield.
man.
Fuck that dude.
Fuck yeah.
No, never mind. He's the best dude.
Yeah. I had the white armor versus his purple, but I had them skills that paid the bills.
Yeah, as long as I pay the
Oh,
bills.
shit.
That's what matters.
Somebody's in here.
Shit.
Alright, I'm almost dead. I need to heal up.
Nice. Another guy. Oh shit. Nice. I got 4 seconds on the bot. Another motherfucker somewhere. I hear him upstairs. Are you
No,
muted,
no,
Jeff?
I'm just trying not to cry into my iced tea. And let me tell you, it is tough.
Oh, I don't know where that fucking guy went. Oh, there's my 2X and wing man.
Got the wing, man.
Wang mine.
You won't, yeah, wang man. Oh shit, we gotta get in the circle, Joe. Meet up with this fool through the tunnels.
Yeah, I dibs that threat detector, but you can have it if you want it. Just
No,
does
I
your
don't need it.
threat,
I got
no?
what I want on my side. Oh shit, he getting shot.
I'm recalling my drone.
Oh, they're fucking mile away. Sorry, kids. Not today, Junior.
What? Where the hell did you... Oh shit, you got zipped. Fuck. Fudge! I'm all not
Oh,
doing stuff.
Junior just knocked my shield off.
Oh man, I fell off the fucking zip line. I'm a dummy. I was jumping and grabbing on because he was shooting at me. And then I wasn't able to grab on one time.
Where these fools at, kid? He's on that rooftop where
Alright, I'm trying to...
he's a mile away. I'm rushing
Alright,
that fool.
I'm with you. Alright, teammates healing up, but whatever. We'll do it ourselves.
Oh.
I'm going through.
I broke a shield on one of these
Nice.
schools. Shit.
What? How the fuck does that go through them? That shot should have fucking landed.
Reload. One more, I guess, unless
Nope.
you took somebody out.
Nope.
That's a caustic alive. I don't know where he at.
Alright, I'm gonna throw my drone out and get a.
You got full
Yeah,
health?
just about. I'm good.
I shot a purple drone. Oh no, this is a. Oh, that's your drone. Fine. I keep forgetting to pay attention to the color.
Yeah, there's stuff in the tracks over here. There's a blue helmet, and a purple shotgun.
I got a blue one if you want.
Thing.
Oh, I
Oh,
hear
right
the
here?
dude. I hear the
Yep.
caustic.
It's not a caustic.
Oh, this is not the caustic.
Oh yeah, I should put those on my wingman.
Another box up there. Oops. I didn't mean to pick up energy. Ooh, Phoenix kit. I'm running towards this
Yep.
kid as soon as you.
I'm 20 feet behind you.
Oh, I can't.
There you go. Oh shit. I'm not.
Damn.
Yeah, I'm not
Far
following.
away again.
There's a charge rifle on both fucking.
Yeah, fuck.
I'm hopping back in my
Get the
drone to
dumbass.
give us some eyeballs.
Alright. Oh shit, oh shit.
Yeah.
Oh, we gotta, let's get
Alright.
inside, let's get inside. Let's ambush these
Hold on, I'm gonna
kids.
see if I can get Buddy's banner with my drone.
Oh yeah, okay.
So we'll have to go
Nice.
and somebody's zipping up there.
I think they're fighting each other.
All right, so we can probably get them back if you want to try. You just want to try to win. What do?
Oh
Do you have any
shit.
small shield cells?
Yeah, we got two, don't.
I just got big ones.
No.
Okay,
we got
that's
a
all I
battery.
got. All right.
Yeah, that's all I got. Here, Yinti, have an extra
No,
battery.
no,
got a
I
fuse
got
to get
plenty.
the
I
battery.
got plenty. Take it. I actually can drop some for you.
Somebody's zipping.
All right. Do you want to try to get him back, or you want to? What do you want to do?
Okay, might as well. Well, no. I think I down. If I didn't down that guy, he's dead meat. Oh, he's running. Oh fuck! This motherfucker is. Oh my god, I'm so fucking stupid. I hit that guy for 154, and I thought I had him. That might be two guys. Somebody's getting somebody up or attacking or something? No, okay. Oh shit, this is tense.
Yep. I'm gonna see if I can cover these.
Okay, yeah, don't suicide over it. I'm gonna try to get to my box. Oh, they're fighting each other or something? I don't know what the fuck's happening.
There's a gold and a purple box over there.
It's crazy.
Over.
Oh shit. Oh, I'm getting bombed. Oh my god. Oh, I'm stunned. Lose the stun. Lose the stun.
Fuck, I got knocked.
Woo! I'm coming to you. Oh, mark him.
My fucking laser rifle, motherfucker.
I don't know how I fucking didn't kill that fucker. Get him, stupid. Get him, big stupid.
How?
Big stupid, I fucking swear. You better get down here
Yeah,
and
did we
fight.
play with Big Stupid before? That seems really familiar.
I can't remember his name.
The stupid part? I don't know.
Oh, maybe. I vaguely may have a glimmer of a memory.
I vaguely may have a glimmer of a memory. Yo, Josh, what's up? Thank you for the host, buddy. Appreciate that. I don't have my face cam on. 1 second. Boom. Thank you for the host. I appreciate that. It is not a good night.
You guys mean to deprive you of the money maker?
We be dead.
You want to play one more ranked? I probably only got one or two.
I'm feeling the same way, buddy. This has been one rough fucking night.
Oh yeah, I'm down to the lowest possible level.
Yeah, man.
2000.
Yeah, I like when you die and it's like you didn't gain anything. But what we're not telling you is you didn't lose anything because you suck, and normally you would have, but you're as low as you can possibly go.
How low can you go?
Pretty low. Pretty low. It's actually like making me tired. I'm like losing interest because I haven't done damage in games. You ready there, Zero?
Oh, my bad.
It's all good in the hood, you know. So I'm thinking like 2 more games, depending on how terrible they are. Actually, I'm pretty tired. This is gonna be my last game, if it's decent.
Game time.
This is gonna be a good fight.
Oh shit! You guys have seen that meme that's like a white guy's arm and a black guy's arm, like doing a bro handshake top thing.
No, not a bro shake.
I thought they were like arm wrestling.
Yeah, oh, they are arm wrestling. That's what it is. Yeah, yeah. It just kind of looks like they were, but it kind of looks like a friendship thing, but it is arm wrestling. Anyway, this one says Justin Trudeau, also Justin Trudeau on both sides, like the Canadian Prime Minister that had all the pictures wearing blackface.
Oh yeah.
Show that one to Zed.
He'll get a kick out of it. Got somebody landing with me. I landed on like the zip line pole. There's somebody over there.
Taking your trap, you chump. Yeah, you just got played, bitch. Welcome to the jungle.
Congratulations, you just played yourself.
That's right. Dude, coming. Oh, that's Grim. Okay, I think we got somebody with us, Grim. I'm with you, Grim.
I'm with you also. None of us have shirts. We're all just fucking running around topless.
Got him.
Where that enemy at? Oh, nice.
They're all the way over here running away. Lock
Oh,
up
need
bitch,
no
I'm gonna
shirts?
execute him. Watch my back.
Oh,
I don't
okay,
want to waste
okay.
bullets.
Okay.
I'm
you
double
kicked her
heavy,
through the
so-
tracks, it looked like. That was hilarious.
Fuck
She just
you,
melted. Train is
She was
unlooted.
melted through. Oh yeah, we can hop on the train. There's probably cool stuff on here, cool vests and shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's totes unlooted.
Me.
Who's not on here, Joe? Can you stop?
I'm
the
coming.
train?
I'm coming. I'm coming. I'm coming.
It's stopping automatically.
It's it's stopping here anyway. Cool vest, Phoenix kit.
Dude,
another
pick up that
Phoenix
Phoenix kit. There's another one for Joe up front.
Oh no,
accidentally
I
picked
grabbed
up,
that. I
Joe,
grabbed that
there's-
Phoenix shit. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I thought you were talking to me.
You take that Phoenix kit.
I don't have fucking.
No,
vest.
no, I was.
Or, no, I have a vest. I don't have. What don't I have? Bag. So I can't carry anything. Alright, you want to hop off and just fight the rest of the people here? How many, did you guys kill anyone? I killed one, so there might be a couple left.
I killed one.
So there's probably one left.
Yeah, whatever. We can hop off. I don't care. Or we could ride it. Whatever. I don't care.
Whatever you
All
guys
right, we'll ride it. We're already riding it. We'll ride it.
Let's just
We're
ride it
riding
for some more
it.
loot.
We're riding the train. There's somebody right there. Let's ride that shit to win. I'm going.
Yep.
I hit him with the R-Star, bro.
Yep.
I hit him with the R-Star. From
Man.
on the fucking
And then I was
train,
able to
bro.
actually shoot him for 26 damage.
Got one down.
Where's the other one? Upstairs.
Ran somewhere.
I'm
Yeah,
going
he's upstairs in a shield.
Where are they?
There's two of them up here. Two of them.
Oh yeah, there's two of them up here. So I'm down. There's still two up there. God damn.
Oh, he's jumping down the stairs.
Yeah, that was fucking fun. God damn it.
Good shooting.
I can't believe I hit
Dude,
that dude with an arc star from on the
record.
train,
Did you do a clip real quick? See if it'll record it, dude.
dude.
Hurry the fuck up.
Yeah. 2 minutes probably, right?
Possibly.
Yeah, probably. Go for it. Hurry up. Hurry up.
I just did 2 minutes.
I'll play one more.
Yeah, I'll
after
do
that
one
if
more.
y'all want to. I mean, that was fairly short.
That Kobe shot with the arc star was exciting.
What? Oh, we didn't get enough rank. I thought I was going to get some points for sure on that shit.
What the fuck? Playing some weird clip. What? Recent
Say clip
captures.
uploaded.
Oh, here we go. Yeah. I guess I played it too quick before it was even there and it was showing me some other shit. Alright, here's me on the train. Fast forward, fast forward. Up. Fast forwarded too much. There we go. We're riding on the train. Bang! Yep.
That's an awesome stick. What'd you do? Like aim it at the door and they were running in, or did you aim it just
No,
at you?
I saw the dude outside, and then I just tried to throw it in his general direction, because the train was moving, you know. So like, and then I just plunk, automatically took a shield away, and then blew up. You know, after a couple seconds.
Nice.
Damn, that's third time I nailed somebody with an arc star today. I'm on fire with the arc star.
Oh shit, my bad.
Oh, okay, never mind. No, I don't mind. I was about to say if you want to take it.
Stitch 'em up.
Are you either with me or you're against me, or you're with me and against me? Because, I'll be honest, that happens sometimes.
This is your champion.
I'm looking at some news story here, and it says Sydney knife attack victim pulls out 20-centimeter blade out of his something like a 8-inch knife. It said the 30-year-old told his attacker, "Go on, fucking stab me," before the incident broke out.
I mean, that's not a knife. This is a knife.
Yeah, that really was a knife. That was Crocodile's knife.
Somebody's landing at my door.
Well, let them in for some tea and crimpets.
Oh, I do have a gun.
Alright, I got a peacekeeper and a wingman.
I got a 2 to 4. I'm dropping. Sniper stock.
Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa,
You
whoa,
got
whoa, whoa,
shot?
mother. Fuck, man.
I'm coming, Joe. There's a white vest on the way to here.
Oh my god.
How do I get up there? How do I get up there? Right here? God! Fuck! Damn!
No! Oh, his shotty was ready a tenth of a second before mine was. I would have shot him in that next shot. God damn.
Alright, that's it for me. I'm fucking
2
done.
shots with the peacekeeper.
I'm done. That was fun.
Alright.
For not really.
We'll get on soon.
Yeah, I'll be on tomorrow for more punishment.
Hey, we
We'll
had
run 'em.
some good games. Alright.
Alright.
Adios,
guys.
fellas.
I'll see you guys later. Adios, amigo. No problema, yo estoy bien.
Gracias, senor. Senor, gracias. Alright. Oh my goodness. What a shit show. That was not a good night. So yeah, thank you everybody for stopping by. I appreciate it. Means everything to me. Those who did stop by. Josh Stairs, thank you for the host. I really appreciate that. Again, means everything. Everybody who's whatever you stop by on, whether it was Twitch, Facebook, Mixer, YouTube, whatever. I love all of you. To those who didn't stop